July 2025. The sun hammers down on Carolina Wilga. She's been lost for 11 days. 15 miles of wandering has drained the last of her strength, and now she can't go any farther. Out here, she is completely at the mercy of the outback. And you're about to find out her fate isn't an exception, it's a grim reality. You don't need a geography degree to notice Australia has an absurd amount of empty space. The population clings to the coastline like they have commitment issues, and when you look at a map, you can see why. There's only 8.37 people per square mile in Oz. The closest equivalent on the map is the Sahara. In fact, 90% of Australians live within an hour of the ocean. Is it because of the stunning views, the perfect beaches, or is it because everything beyond that coastal strip looks like a survival show that never ends? Let's find out. The first place that can give us an insight into Australia's empty lands is Coober Pedy. Population around 1,400. It's 526 miles north of Adelaide. Some people call it the opal capital of the world because the ground keeps coughing up shiny rocks. The trade is big enough to support what looks like a regular town, but don't be fooled. Those buildings, mostly empty, just entrances to the real town. Shops, churches, hotels, entire homes carved into the rock like a modern-day hobbit kingdom. This is the only place where going full mole people is cheaper than having an air conditioner, and somehow this made the town a tourist attraction. But Coober Pedy is the warm-up, because Australia's interior only gets hotter, drier, and more aggressively uninhabitable the farther you go. The outback takes 73% of the continent, home to just 5% of its people. Average summer temps, 113 degrees Fahrenheit. Water sources, occasional. It's not quite the Sahara, but it's like a distant relative, the kind you see at holidays and suddenly remember why you avoid them. Average temperatures go above 113 degrees Fahrenheit. Average. But the heat isn't the only problem. Where's the water, you may ask? Sure, there are a few oases out here, little green spots of congratulations, you're still alive. Most prominent ones are Delucy Springs or the ancient Finca River, but on a continent this size, that's barely enough to keep a cactus hydrated. Most of Australia's interior is a BYO water zone, where rainfall shows up like a deadbeat dad, rarely, and always at the worst possible moment. And even when it does rain, it's not gentle plants and rainbows rain, it's the flash flood that eats your car kind. But we'll get to that catastrophe later. Between the heat, the dryness, and some of the oldest, most nutrient-depleted soils on the planet, the outback is a place that simply does not care about humans much. And even with modern tech, the outback still regularly wins. Only 6% of Australia's territory is suitable for agriculture. The rest? Some of the poorest, grumpiest, least fertile soils on Earth. It's dirt that has given up. The continent doesn't have an Ice Age legacy either. Turns out glaciers are great for soil. They grind rock into fresh, nutrient-rich debris and then politely leave it behind when they decide to dip back to the poles. Australia got none of that. And I don't know if you noticed, but the outback is huge. Early explorers died constantly. The ones who didn't had to get creative. The Wills expedition of 1860, they ended up eating their own camels and horses. When your transport turns into the dish of the day, you know you made the wrong choices. Air travel didn't make the outback safer either. Aviators could still end up stranded and starving if a flight went sideways. And the danger didn't stop with the invention of GPS. When Carolina Wilga's van broke down during her backpacking trip, she decided it would be better to set out for help. After walking for 11 days, surviving on meager supplies and puddle water, she had made her peace. She was never going to be found. But by sheer luck, a passing motorist spotted Carolina and she was airlifted to a hospital. Police were amazed that she had survived for so long. But Carolina wasn't unique. This is a common tale in the outback. Back in 2021, a couple of tourists chose the wrong place at the wrong time and learned that the outback is the epitome of mess around and find out. Jose Merlos and Nikki Wong were driving through South Australia with their dog when their car got bogged down in sand. And because it was January, the Outback cranked the thermostat past 100 degrees Fahrenheit just to make things interesting. They survived only by drinking, well, emergency fluids. They were found on a road someone uses literally once every 6 weeks. That's the Outback, a place so empty you have to plan your rescue in advance. The biggest city in the Outback is Kalgoorlie-Boulder. Locals call it Calgary, and for that, I'm grateful. Anyway, it sits in Western Australia's Goldfields Esperance area. The population is about 30,000, and it exists only because of one thing: gold. Shiny rocks are powerful motivators. Honestly, everything about the Outback screams do not live here, but people still tried. After all, what's the point of having all that land if nobody's brave or desperate enough to use it? Back in 1788, King George III was a man on a mission. He wanted to clear and improve the land, no matter what. And if that meant handing convicts a get-out-of-jail-please-go-farm card, so be it. Why keep people locked up when the continent you're settling already looks like a prison level from a survival game? But to be fair, George wasn't totally delusional. On a map, the geography looked promising-ish. The Outback doesn't have many rivers, but the one it does have is the Murray River. Over 1,500 miles long, it's the biggest water ribbon Australia has, and its tributaries, 5 of Australia's longest rivers. Add it all together, and you've got a catchment covering 1/7 of the entire continent. On paper, that's an agricultural jackpot. In reality, you unlocked wet Mars. Settlers doubled down anyway. They even came up with ring barking, basically tree assassination. They cleared 44% of New South Wales this way. And the payoff? Nothing. Zip. The soil just sat there, shrugging. No matter how many trees you strangle, you can't turn the Outback into a farming paradise. Trees and shrubs are kinda like sponges. The rain falls and they use most of it. The evaporated salt gets absorbed and doesn't contaminate fresh groundwater. Everyone wins. But when you start swinging an axe for farmland, more rain goes into the soil, and that means more salt. Your fields are now glorified hot dog water. So yeah, the Outback wasn't becoming the next Iowa. It was becoming a giant salt lamp. No, and if you like these deep geography dives, make sure you hit that subscribe button. At this point, my motivation's disappearing faster than the Great Barrier Reef. Anyway, in 2002, authorities found 4.32 to 4.9 million acres of land that was too salty to use, almost 7.5 times the size of the entire Australian Capital Territory. The worst of it? In southwest Western Australia and the Murray-Darling Basin, especially its western end. That's right, even Australia's river superstar couldn't avoid the Great Salty Curse. And yet, despite all this, Australia thrives, but only in one tiny slice of the continent, the coastline. Why does an entire continent depend on a narrow ring of land? Why did almost every major city pop up where the ocean meets the shore? And what does that mean for Australia's future? Let's dig in. Australia still cranks out way more food than it eats. Way more. It exports 70% of its agricultural production, about 90 billion Australian dollars in 2023 and 2024. That's a massive pile of money for a continent that's supposedly barren. And it all comes from the coastal plains. First of all, the coastal climate is absurdly good. It's like Australia hid all its nice weather in one narrow strip. Summers run in the 60s to 80s Fahrenheit. Winters are in the 30s to 50s. Meanwhile, the Eastern Gulf gets 59 to 65 inches of rain. Swan Coastal Plain gives off a mild Mediterranean vibe, and the Southeast Coastal Plain is one of the few places in the Southern Hemisphere with a temperate climate. This is Australia's Costco. It's where practically everything grows. Wheat, sugarcane, fruits, veggies, the works. Compared to the Outback right next door, the continent feels like it's having an identity crisis. But perfect weather isn't the only reason civilization hugs the coastline. For the real secret, head to New South Wales. Sydney, population 5.5 million, didn't get huge by accident. It sits on the largest natural harbor in the world. Port Jackson covers 21.2 square miles. It plunges to 148 feet. Cruise ships, cargo ships, Navy ships. If it floats, it fits. But Sydney's not the only coastal heavyweight. It's actually starting to lose the crown thanks to another top port. On August 30th, 1835, Melbourne was founded at the head of Port Phillip Bay, right where the Yarra River meets the sea. Another natural harbor, and somehow even busier than Port Jackson. 3 million shipping containers pass through every year, even though ships have to navigate the Rip, a stretch of water that looks like it was designed by someone who hates boats. And why? Because the Australian dollar demands tribute. Melbourne's central business district is already the most densely packed part of the country. Nearby suburbs like Carlton, South Yarra, Fitzroy, and Collingwood aren't far behind, all living that premium sardine lifestyle. The city's population is expected to hit 7.3 million by 2046, which means the sardines are about to need a bigger tin. Sydney and Melbourne are part of a clear pattern. Almost all of Australia's major cities, Brisbane, Newcastle, Adelaide, Headland, Darwin, the whole gang, they sit on major ports. These were the places British ships could actually reach without exploding. Civilization spread out from these hubs because they had everything a new colony needed: protection, trade access, and a place to park very large boats. And those harbors helped create one of history's great ironies. The descendants of the prisoners shipped here ended up richer than the people who exiled them. How's that for cosmic karma? And Australia isn't complaining. Its massive coastline of natural harbors turned the former penal colony into a full-blown export machine. Not just food, but gold, iron ore, natural gas, and oil. Basically anything the rest of the world is willing to pay for. If it's shiny, burnable, or exploitable, Australia will ship it. Sure, Australia might look hostile, but underneath? A continent sitting on over $20 trillion in natural resources, 8th in the world. Australia runs on mining booms. The 1850s gold rush was the moment the place stopped looking like a lifelong punishment and started looking like a startup with infinite growth potential. Over 1 million people flooded in. The population went from 430,000 in 1851 to 1.7 million 20 years later. Exports from New South Wales and Victoria grew sixfold. Not bad for a place that was supposed to be a jail with sunburn. And the gold rush didn't stop at one season. Round 2 hit in the late 19th century. New mines opened up in Western Australia, Queensland, and Western New South Wales. Western Australia alone jumped from 48,000 to 180,000 people between 1890 and 1901. Proof that nothing moves humans faster than the promise of gold. Well, except maybe free Wi-Fi. New boomtowns followed, including Kalgoorlie, born in the 1880s gold rush and still kicking because the gold hasn't run out yet. It's home to one of the world's biggest open-cut gold mines, adorably named the Super Pit. Broken Hill, out in the New South Wales outback, was founded in 1883, and it still exists, which already makes it an outback overachiever. Like Kalgoorlie, the mining never stopped. Broken Hill sits on one of the world's biggest deposits of silver, lead, and zinc. And by outback standards, the weather is practically pleasant, meaning you don't go full lobster and boil alive. Highs in January hover around 93 degrees Fahrenheit. Hot, but not hallucinate hot. So there was money to be made, and only a medium amount of suffering required. Win-win. Fast forward to modern times. China decided it was glorious to get rich, and Australia suddenly became its favorite hardware store. Coal, liquefied natural gas, iron ore, all the fundamentals you need to build ghost cities that nobody lives in. The latest mining boom peaked in 2010 and hit 8.5% of Australia's GDP. New boomtowns popped up: Karratha, Port Hedland, places that look coastal but still behave like the outback. Even in winter, they can flirt with 90 degrees Fahrenheit. Then, the boom ended. Property values did the fall-off-a-cliff thing. Karratha's home prices dropped 65% between 2012 and 2017. The inland town of Newman said, "Struth, hold my beer," and crashed 82%. Today, Newman's barely at 6,500 people. Karratha sits around 17,000. Port Hedland, about 15,300. And those older boomtowns? Broken Hill peaked at 30,000 people in 1966. That was its moment. It's been shrinking ever since. That's the reality of a mining town. People show up, dig until the money stops, and then go home. But the big coastal cities, Perth, Sydney, Melbourne, that's a different story. there's always something happening because Australia's economy is actually diverse. Mining and agriculture are just two slices of the pie. Australia is also a financial heavyweight. Retail, property development, tech, you name it, Australia has it. And all of it works because the coastal cities have the ports that move everything the outback coughs up. Those natural harbors are the arteries that keep the entire economy alive. Everything a thriving civilization needs is on the coast. Theoretically, there's no limit to how big these cities can get. Well, maybe. Because even here, the water problem hasn't magically gone away. Big cities drink water like teenagers guzzling energy drinks. And businesses, even worse. Data centers, including the ones keeping this very video alive, use 11 to 19 million gallons a day. And climbing. ChatGPT does not materialize out of thin air. Without water, these buildings would run hotter than the outback in January. But even with those coastal rains, Australia is still the driest inhabited place on Earth. Antarctica is technically drier, but it doesn't count. Australia actually has cities to keep alive. Antarctica has birds in tuxedos. And amazingly, up until 1997, Australia was managing pretty well. The Murray's catchment, plus a bunch of TVA-style dams, kept the taps flowing. Not luxurious, but at least people could still brush their teeth. Then, everything changed. The Millennium Drought. The moment Australia looked up at the sky and realized, oh, we're on our own now. There was a strong El Niño in 1997. That meant coastal Australia got less rain, sometimes record lows. Meanwhile, the outback got more rain than normal. Make it make sense. You can't. The weirdness didn't last, though. By 2002, almost the entire continent was in drought. Things hit peak misery in the mid-2000s. 2006 became one of Southeast Australia's driest years ever, with rainfall down 40 to 60%. Everything was crisp and crunchy. For many Australians, it felt like the outback had marched right to the coast. La Niña finally broke the drought in 2010 to 2011, but it was too late. Australia had already lost half of its agricultural output. Half! Like the sky flipped a coin and said, you lose. And the drought made one thing painfully obvious. The big cities couldn't rely on dams and catchments anymore. They needed water from somewhere else. And in Australia, somewhere else means the ocean. You know, the same salty troublemaker that makes farming a nightmare. So in 2006, Perth opened the Perth Seawater Desalination Plant. At full blast, it supplies 17% of the city's water. But it's not enough, so they built another. The Southern Seawater Desalination Plant opened in 2012, adding another 20% of Perth's supply. But the drought wouldn't quit. So, Australia supersized things. The Sydney Desalination Plant opened in 2012. And in the same year, because apparently 2012 was Desalination Christmas, the Adelaide Desalination Plant opened. 50% of Adelaide's water, 10% of all South Australia's. And here's the really big one. The Victorian Desalination Plant, up to 60% of Melbourne's daily water supply. Australia has at least 26 desalination plants humming away around the coast. But desalination has its critics, loud ones. For starters, it's expensive. Sydney's plant cost 1.7 billion Australian dollars to build and then demanded $300,000 a day in payments to investors for 50 years, even when it wasn't producing water. And it's not just about the money. Desalination makes brine, polluted, salty sludge. You can't just pour it into the ocean and call it a day. It needs treatment, disposal, monitoring, more money, and more headaches. Imagine trying that in the outback. You'd have to desalinate seawater and then haul it thousands of miles by truck or pipeline. All that cost, all that effort, all that infrastructure. And for what? To convince people to live in a region that's competing for the least livable place on Earth title? Those unbearable outback temperatures, they're getting worse. In August of 2025, it's winter there, remember, the town of Unadada hit 103 degrees Fahrenheit. Only 102 people live there, but still, winter shouldn't feel like a malfunctioning sauna. And the heat gets even scarier. Western Australia has a triangle more terrifying than Bermuda's. The Outback's heat triangle between Onslow, Telfer, and Gascoyne Junction hit 122 degrees Fahrenheit in 2022. That's not weather, that's slow roasting. Remember Newman, the same town whose housing market evaporated after the mining boom? It hit almost 117 degrees Fahrenheit during heat waves this year. But hold on, Newman isn't at sea level. Put Newman at sea level and the real number jumps up to 126 degrees Fahrenheit. That's not just hot. That's why is my shadow sweating hot. And it's getting worse. Heat waves like this are coming by more often. What's not coming by more often? Rain. The Millennium Drought may have ended in 2010, but it feels like it was just Act 1 of a very grim trilogy. The Tinderbox Drought arrived between 2017 and 2019, and it hit in the one place you really don't want drought, the Murray-Darling Basin. Rainfall was 50% below normal the whole time. And the big finale, 2019, was both the hottest and driest year Australia had ever recorded. Congratulations, Mother Nature, you broke your own high score. And if you zoom out, the trend does not improve. Australia's recent wave of droughts looks like the worst in at least 400 years. So yeah, not great. Put simply, investing heavily in the Outback would be more trouble than it's worth. Technically possible? Maybe. Worth it? Absolutely not. Australia isn't empty by choice, it's empty by design. Geography built invisible walls long before people drew borders. The coast isn't just where Australians live, it's where Australia itself works. Thanks for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you want to see more videos like this, then please consider subscribing and turn on notifications. It really does make a difference. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time on MatPack. NASA has been watching the US from space, and it spotted something we'd miss standing on the shoreline. America isn't running low on water. Parts of the country are quietly losing the plumbing that keeps lakes alive. And the worst part is, the law is supporting it. And here's the scary part. Even when the rain comes back, the lakes won't. 41 lakes have vanished in 20 years. And the thief isn't where you'd look, but more on that shortly. It would be easy to frame this vanishing water desert problem, confined to the dry, dusty corners of Nevada and Arizona. But that would be wrong. This isn't an isolated issue. Lakes are disappearing in the southeast and the Midwest of the country as well. The geography of the country is changing in ways most people don't notice. But this isn't just a drought. A drought ends. Rain returns. This is something different. The first step in understanding this collapse is realizing that most of the lakes under threat were never natural to begin with. Take a look at a map. The blue splashes suggest a permanent body of water. But a map doesn't tell the history of the dirt underneath. The reality of American geography is that the last century was spent building a synthetic water landscape. And now, that landscape is starting to crack. Take Lake Mead and Lake Powell, for example. Technically, they aren't lakes. They're tanks. They're massive, artificial storage facilities carved from rock by dynamite, concrete, and political will. They exist only because pumps and rivers push water in. When the river flow drops, even slightly, these systems have no backup. A reservoir usually fails all at once. In the southeast, Lake Lanier, created by the Army Corps of Engineers in the 1950s, supplies Atlanta. There's nothing natural about it. It sits on a pipe. But real lakes have a backup built into the system. Tulare Lake in California serves as a warning. You might not know the name, because for most of modern history, it hasn't been there. But in the mid-1800s, it was the largest freshwater lake west of the Mississippi River. It was a giant natural wetland system bursting with life. So what happened? Settlers didn't like where the water was. They wanted farmland. In the late 1800s, they systematically drained it, building canals and diverting the rivers that fed it. They dried it out to plant crops. Today, Tulare Lake only reappears during rare, extreme storms, rising up from the dirt to flood the farms that replaced it. It's a zombie lake, rising occasionally to cause carnage. But the real disaster isn't happening where it can be seen. The real crisis is happening beneath the soil. Beneath the United States lies a hidden network of aquifers, giant underground sponges holding water that fell as rain thousands of years ago. For decades, farmers and cities drilled wells and pumped it up. Now, humanity is draining them faster than nature can refill them. This is the groundwater time bomb. And that's the thief I mentioned earlier. Not the sky, not the sun, but the pump beneath your feet. In just 20 years, farmers pumped out enough water to supply California for nearly a year. Since 1900, enough water has been drained to fill Lake Erie twice. This isn't just extra water disappearing, it's how lakes vanish. Base flow, the water table pushing up from below, keeps lakes full even when it doesn't rain. But as trillions of gallons are pumped, the water table falls. Eventually, it drops below the lake. The support system collapses. The lake drains into the ground. And once that happens, it doesn't refill when it rains. You don't just get a drought cycle, you get a permanent downgrade. It's already happening in rural Texas. Farmers are now facing a future without irrigated crops and are capping generation wells. Towns like Perryton, Texas, are already capping irrigation wells because there's nothing left to pump. In the Colorado River Basin, satellite data tells a terrifying story. The loss of groundwater is more than double the loss of surface water in Lakes Mead and Powell. The system is bleeding out from the bottom. Who or what is responsible? Of course, humans. In the Colorado River Basin, human consumption accounts for more than half of the total water loss. Climate change acts as a threat multiplier. It heats up the air, evaporates more water, and melts the snowpack too early. But climate change is just part of the problem. Industrial agriculture and urban sprawl are contributing too. A photo from 1977 taken in California's San Joaquin Valley illustrates this perfectly. It shows a geologist standing next to a telephone pole. Above him, a sign marks where the ground level used to be. The sign for the year 1925 is 30 feet above his head. The ground didn't just settle. It collapsed. When water is drained from the tiny pockets in the soil, the weight of the earth above compresses them until they cave in. The ground itself sinks, a process known as subsidence. In some parts of America, the land is sinking a foot every year. This slow-motion failure is shattering the infrastructure built on top of it. It snaps well casings. It cracks the concrete lining of canals. Underground water pipes are shearing off. Bridges and highways are developing deep cracks in their foundations. In Houston, Texas, extensive groundwater pumping caused the city to sink by several feet over the last century. This changes the physics of the city. It twists the slope of sewage lines, causing waste to back up. It changes the flood maps. Neighborhoods that used to be above sea level have physically dropped down. And when the next hurricane hits, it could be catastrophic. The cost to fix this invisible damage is already in the billions, a hidden tax everyone is paying for water mismanagement. But what about the rain? What about the snow? This is the most confusing part of the crisis. Lakes are shrinking even in years with heavy rainfall. In 2023, the West was hammered by massive storms. Record amounts of rain and snow fell. Lake Powell and Lake Mead rose a few feet, but those gains were temporary. Cities, farms, and factories sucked that new water up instantly. The long-term trend line didn't change. It kept pointing down. In the Great Lakes region, winter is becoming a problem. The lakes are warming, which means less ice forms. Ice acts like a protective lid, slowing evaporation. Without that shield, dry winter winds sweep across open water, pulling moisture from the lakes around the clock. Even heavy snow can't make up for the loss. These lakes can lose more water to the air than they gain from snowfall. In Florida, the situation is even more paradoxical. Lake Okeechobee sits at the center of the state as a massive reservoir of water. But during the rainy season, engineers deliberately dump billions of gallons into the ocean. They send billions of gallons rushing to the sea to protect sugarcane fields and nearby cities. Ironically, the lake often ends the rainy season lower than it began. Across the West, lakes aren't dying by accident. They're dying because the law says they have to. The rule is called prior appropriation. First in time, first in right. It was meant to stop miners from fighting over water, but today it only protects corporate farms.
Farmers with the oldest claims take their full share first. Cities and lakes get what's left. And because rights are use it or lose it, they pump every last drop, even if they don't need it. The law basically rewards draining the river. The Colorado River Compact of 1922, 7 states promised more water than the river can give, and the lake pays the price. There was just one problem. The river doesn't have that much water. In reality, the river only averages about 15 million acre-feet. The government promised away water that literally does not exist. Because those promises are written into a federal contract, states like Colorado and Utah are legally entitled to their share. They divert the water upstream, and downstream Lake Mead is being starved to death. Nowhere is this trap more obvious than in Utah. The Great Salt Lake decline can be measured in feet. In the mid-1980s, the lake was healthy, sitting at an elevation of just over 4,200 feet and covering 3,300 square miles. It was a vast inland sea. By November of 2022, the lake hit a historic low, dropping more than 24 feet. In less than 40 years, it's lost 73% of its water volume. So where did the water go? More than 60% of the water diverted from the lake goes to a single crop, alfalfa hay. Alfalfa is thirsty. It requires flood irrigation. And because alfalfa farmers hold senior water rights dating back to the 1800s, they can keep flooding their fields while the lake disappears just a few miles away. The law protects the crop, not the lake. State efforts to lease water have returned roughly 400,000 acre-feet to the basin, but nature is moving faster. High evaporation rates and upstream farming continue to drain the system. Experts say the lake needs double that, an extra 800,000 acre-feet every single year, just to climb back to a safe level by 2055. But recovering a lake isn't just a matter of hoping for rain. It takes action, both in the ground and in the courts. Engineers can build recharge projects, capturing stormwater and pushing it back underground, slowly refilling aquifers that once fed lakes. But even the best pumps can't do it alone. The law has to change too. Limiting the power of senior water rights, enforcing realistic allocations, and ending the use it or lose it system could stop farmers from draining rivers just to hold on to paper claims. Not every lake has the same shot at survival, though. Some are still hooked to underground aquifers, which act as lifelines during dry years. Others sit entirely within one state, where rules can actually be enforced. Multi-state lakes, on the other hand, face a tangle of competing claims. We can ultimately imagine lakes in 3 fates. Doomed lakes are cut off from their aquifers, straddling state lines with no legal protection. At-risk lakes have a fighting chance. They're partially connected to aquifers and under local control, but saving them will take major effort. Savable lakes are the lucky ones, fully connected to groundwater, governed locally, and protected by enforceable water cuts and active recharge projects. And if draining rivers wasn't enough, we're exporting the water too. When the U.S. exports a crop, it isn't just shipping food. It's shipping the water it took to grow it. In the American West, billions of gallons flow overseas to countries that have already drained their own aquifers. Saudi dairy giant Almarai bought thousands of desert acres in Arizona, not for the view, but for crops. With almost no water loss, Almarai drills deep wells, pumps freely, and ships U.S. water abroad. And they're not alone. Foreign corporations are buying American land just for the water rights, and they know exactly what they're doing. We spent decades treating oil like a strategic resource, but we're letting foreign corporations mine our groundwater with almost no oversight. So what happens when a lake dies? It doesn't just leave a hole in the ground. It leaves a bomb. California provides a dark preview with the Salton Sea. Created by accident in 1905 when an irrigation canal broke, it became a thriving ecosystem. For decades, it drew tourists and served as a crucial stop for millions of migratory birds. And then, the region grew thirsty. San Diego and the Coachella Valley needed water. In the 1990s and 2000s, policymakers made a choice. They diverted the flows that fed the Salton Sea to the cities instead. The sea began to shrink. Its salinity doubled the oceans. The fish died, and then the birds did too. It became a sacrifice zone, legally abandoned, but the sea is fighting back. As the water recedes, it exposes the lakebed. This isn't just mud. It's a toxic mix of a century of farm runoff full of pesticides, arsenic, and heavy metals like selenium. When the wind blows across the cracked earth, it picks up this toxic dust that sweeps into the towns nearby, where asthma rates are skyrocketing. And now, people are starting to panic. There's a growing narrative. If the Southwest dries up, just move north. But the data tells a different story. Even in the wet, cold north, lakes are disappearing. In the deep woods of Wisconsin and Minnesota, small lakes are vanishing. Why? Farms next door. Industrial potato and corn operations are pumping massive amounts of groundwater. The numbers are alarming. In southwest Kansas, the Ogallala Aquifer fell more than 1.5 feet in a single year. Northwest Kansas saw another foot of loss. This isn't just decline, it's acceleration, signaling a potential collapse. And it's happening faster than the models predicted. As the water gets deeper, it gets harder to reach. Farmers are forced to drill deeper wells, costing upwards of $50,000 just to chase the retreating water. But money can't fix the geology. In the Texas Panhandle, wells are already hitting the intake limits. They're sucking up mud. At this rate, nearly 40% of the usable water in key areas will be gone within a generation. And the economic stakes are terrifying. Experts predict that within 50 years, 70% of the aquifer will be totally useless. When that happens, the climate haven of the Midwest will collapse. The cities built on that water will turn into ghost towns. The population will be forced to migrate again. The United States is entering a new era. The map is being rewritten. The country is moving toward a two-tier geography. There will be places that have water and places that don't. The difference won't be about rain. The survival of a city will depend on whether it sits on the right side of the pipe. Look at the power grid for another example. The Hoover Dam provides electricity to millions across Nevada, Arizona, and California. But it has a weakness. It needs pressure. As Lake Mead drops toward a dead pool, the level where water can no longer flow, the turbines slow. The dam is already producing 20% less power than it used to. If the water hits 950 feet, the turbines stop. The lights go out. Government projections for 2026 show Lake Mead hovering just over 1,000 feet. It sounds like a lot, but in a dam's life, it is critically low. One bad winter, one multi-year dry spell, and the dead pool becomes reality. While politicians fight over paper rights, the physics of the river are taking over. Millions of people balance on a knife's edge. Utilities scramble. Coal and gas plants need water. Losing water costs energy. Making energy costs water. The impact spreads. 30% of all U.S. crops rely on the Ogallala Aquifer. As it dries, food prices spike. Dust storms rise from drained lake beds. The toxic dust bomb of Owens Lake is just the beginning. Some lakes are gone for good. Tulare Lake is a ghost, Owens Lake a desert. The Salton Sea is on death row. But there is a slice of hope. The giants, Lake Mead, Lake Powell, and the Great Salt Lake, are all on the edge of the cliff, but they haven't fallen off yet. They can be saved, but only if human laws, pumps, and priorities start working with nature instead of against it. And if they don't, the turbines stop, the lights go out, darkness spreads across millions of homes. America blinks, and for the first time, it doesn't come back on. Thanks for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you want to see more videos like this, then please consider subscribing and turn on notifications. It really does make a difference. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time on MatPack. Greenland is the world's largest island, over 3 times the size of Texas, but fewer people live there than in Kalamazoo, Michigan. Why? You might think it's obvious. It's cold, it's remote, basically one giant ice cube. But the real story is a lot messier. So let's explore this frozen giant and see what makes people stay and what pushes them away. And if you like these weekly map dives, make sure to hit that subscribe button, because my retirement plan currently involves wishful thinking. Greenland's been lying to you.
it's not that green. It's more of a blinding white. 80% of the island is covered in ice. But not just any ice, an ice sheet up to 1.9 miles thick in some spots. Half the height of Mount Kilimanjaro, but a lot colder and flatter. There's soil lurking under it, as well as mountains, canyons, and a whole lot of other features. But farming? Forget about it. Turns out the branding team oversold it. Greenland was green 2.5 million years ago, and now, just like that one Walt Disney rumor, all that greenness has been cryogenically frozen since then. Greenland's glaciers double as iceberg factories. They dump giant chunks into the North Atlantic, leaving ships to play dodgeball. Titanic? Yeah, let's go ahead and pin that one on Greenland. Icebergs can be as tall as New York City apartment towers. The big difference? You don't need 6 roommates to afford one. And remember, that's just the tip. 90% of the berg is still underwater. Icebergs aren't just sinking ships. They're also sinking Greenland's trade. Well, kind of. But I'll get into that iceberg-sized problem later. On the island, residents squeeze onto a thin coastal strip. But Greenland is huge, though. Over 836,000 square miles. The ice-free land still adds up to the size of Sweden, but just without IKEA. And even that thin coastal strip, parts of it are useless too. The southeast is so bleak, even wildlife stays clear. And since that's what Europeans landed on first, they figured Greenland was hopeless. When you scare off history's most aggressive colonizers, your geography's doing something right. In those coastal communities, people make their living fishing and more fishing. Oh, and whaling, so big fishing. Turns out Greenland doesn't have many industries keeping it afloat, except a surprising one. But that might actually be a headache. Stick around for that mess. Even the animal kingdom gives southeast Greenland the cold shoulder. Muskox, they're fine up north. Caribou, plenty of them out west. But in the southeast, nothing. Just ice and bleak vibes. Even the small Arctic hare doesn't want to make a home here. Why? Well, first off, this part of Greenland gets pummeled with snow. And we're not talking a snow day kind of snow. We're talking 11 billion metric tons of the stuff. All of it dumped in one megastorm in March of 2022. It snowed so much in Greenland that it briefly stopped the island's ice sheet from shrinking. Take that, climate change. So why do storms hit here? Local currents from the southeast basically steer every storm right into it. Winds, atmospheric rivers, snow, all delivered to the same unlucky address. As if blizzards weren't enough, Greenland's southeast also gets downslope winds. Picture super cooled air deciding gravity's a fun ride and hurling itself toward the Atlantic, slamming the coast with hurricane force. These are called katabatic winds by scientists. Locals call them pitarak, which means wind which attacks you. Everyone else just calls them a reason to move literally anywhere else. These winds flip ships and set off avalanches. If you live on the coast, you're not settling down. You're pre-ordering a burial. No wonder the animals stay away. Okay, so you don't always get strong winds in this part of Greenland, but when you do, they'll knock you off your feet because they can reach 160 miles an hour. One Pitarak event in 1970 blew half the town of Tasiilaq apart. No surprise, since those are Category 5 hurricane wind speeds. Basically, Greenland's wind god woke up and chose violence. At least 15 times a year, winds will pass 40 miles an hour, sometimes a lot more. Bad news for anyone in their way. When southeast winds cross the ice sheet and tumble down the west side, they get a rebrand, Fane winds. They can crank winter temps up by 20 degrees Fahrenheit. Life on the west coast upgrades from freeze off your limbs to just lose your fingers cold. This is why people actually manage to live on Greenland's west and southwest coast. Manage being the key word. It's survivable. Not exactly comfortable. But it's not just the geography on Greenland that's problematic. It's the location. Really far away from, well, anything. Greenland is sandwiched between the Arctic and North Atlantic Ocean. The closest landmass is Canada, but not Toronto and Vancouver, Canada. More like tundra and windswept snowstorm Canada. Arctic Norway and Sweden have Europe. They're connected to highways and ports. Greenland has ocean. Lots and lots of ocean. The closest Canadian city to Greenland? Iqaluit. Have you heard of it? Probably not. It's got a population of almost 7,400 people. Not exactly a booming town. And even Iqaluit is almost 500 miles away from Greenland's capital. Getting there is also challenging. It's not a commute, it's an ordeal. You have to cross some of the stormiest waters on Earth. Squalls, rogue waves, and a non-stop reminder that the sea doesn't want you there. In the winter, more than 10% of all waves are over 12 feet tall, over 2 times an average person's height, unless you're a short king. I see you from up here. Now imagine sailing through stormy seas and freezing water. Fall in and it's between 30 Fahrenheit and 43 Fahrenheit. That's hypothermia in under 10 minutes. And since hypothermia knocks you out, good luck doggy paddling over 12-foot waves while unconscious. And that's before the multiple, multi-ton icebergs. Average weight of an iceberg in the Grand Banks area, 100,000 to 200,000 tons, and the size of a 15-story building. And that's just the regular ones. The big boys don't mess around. Some weigh up to 10 million tons. One even parked itself next to a Greenlandic town a few years back. Storms, freezing water, icebergs the size of Pisa's Leaning Tower weighing more than 8 Statues of Liberty. Not exactly prime shipping lanes. That's why Greenland is as connected as your uncle's flip phone. With modern transportation and technology, you'd expect reaching Greenland to be much easier, right? Right? Well, you'd be surprised. Greenland's weather changes faster than your Netflix queue. Fog, winds, and icy storms roll in within hours. Flights are frequently delayed or canceled for days. Even Nuuk, the capital, gets grounded by coastal storms. And boats can't work as a backup in the winter months, but I'll get to that. Honestly, it's impressive anyone showed up in Greenland to begin with. The first Paleo-Inuit landed 4,000 to 5,000 years ago. The Sakak people arrived around 2500 BC, then pulled a disappearing act by 800 BC. No one's sure why. Over the years, at least 6 different Inuit cultures came and went, plus some Norse adventurers led by Eric the Red, who clearly needed better vacation ideas. The Norse picked a lucky window to try Greenland. They arrived during the medieval warm period. Extra sunshine and fewer volcanic eruptions made winters in the North Atlantic unusually mild. It made Greenland look almost livable. The ice sheet ghosted for a while. When Eric the Red landed in southern Greenland, it actually looked a little green. Maybe he wasn't totally lying, but he also needed a sales pitch. Come to Greenland sounds a lot better than frozen Misery Island. So he hyped it up back in Iceland and convinced people to join him. They arrived to find one of the coldest places on Earth. Surprise! By 1400 to 1500 AD, the Norse were gone. The warm period ended and the cold came back. That meant their economy tanked. Their biggest moneymaker, walrus ivory. But Europe switched to elephant ivory and Greenland was finished. The Vikings never stood a chance. They lacked the tools, the skills, the knowledge the Inuit had spent centuries perfecting. And it wasn't just them. No outside civilization really knew how to survive there. The Vikings had it easy. The Gulf Stream kept their waters open year-round. Greenland? No such luck. The sea froze solid. The Inuit adapted brilliantly. They invented the kayak, zipping between ice packs to hunt seals. When winter finally slammed the door shut, they just switched tactics. The Inuit turned seal hunting into an art form. Dogs helped them sniff out breathing holes in the ice. Then, hunters placed a hair over the opening. When it twitched, a seal was nearby. If they couldn't see, they pressed an ear to the ice and listened for hours. People were way more patient before the internet. Once the seal showed up, they'd spear it with a toggling harpoon. This was invented over 1,000 years ago. The head stuck in the seal and the shaft would pop free. Suddenly, it was tug of war on ice. Way more intense than the playground version. Honestly, sounds way too tiring for a meal. No wonder no one wanted to move there. Meanwhile, the Vikings were still figuring out how to not die in snowdrifts. The Inuit were also better at dealing with predators, like polar bears. Today, there are 4,400 danger bears roaming around. One for every 10 Greenlanders. Don't love those odds. The Inuit built bows out of muskox horn, tough enough to drop a polar bear.
The Vikings? Despite their rep as fearsome raiders, most were just farmers with swords. Like we mentioned earlier, farming really doesn't work here. Even the Inuits' clothing was better. The women used caribou fur, which totally slayed, and it kept out the cold far better than the Vikings' woolen clothes. When the temperature dips to -40 Fahrenheit, that difference isn't just comfort, it's survival. Inuit women made clothing with sinew in double rows of tiny stitches. When the sinew got wet, it swelled shut, instant waterproofing. Meanwhile, Vikings were probably arguing about whether damp wool counted as weather-resistant. The Inuit developed these weapons, clothes, and hunting techniques over generations. The Norse showed up with farm gear and sweaters. Guess who lasted longer? For them, Greenland wasn't just exhausting. It was an express ticket to Valhalla. The Thule showed up in the 1200s and shrugged off the conditions that wiped out the Norse. Their descendants are still there today. Around 88% of Greenland's population is Inuit. Survival meant small, scattered communities. Greenland's ice, lack of farmland, and brutal cold made big settlements impossible. Inuit communities thrive in Greenland's climate and food culture. For everyone else, life here is harder. Are the Inuit just tougher? Maybe their genes give them cold resistance, like built-in thermal underwear. One study found the Inuit carry gene variants that let their bodies make brown fat, the kind that actually generates heat. Good for them. Most of us just have the useless kind that sits around reminding us we should probably eat a salad. Scientists think the Inuit got these genes from the Denisovans, an offshoot of humanity that split off 500,000 years ago. The Inuit won the genetic lottery before the Denisovans dipped. The rest of us also have brown fat, but mostly as newborns. Good to know, a 3-month-old can stand the cold more than us. The Inuit diet isn't exactly farm to table. It's whales, seals, and fish. Luckily, they've got genetic mutations that let them process omega-3 fatty acids from those animals. Me? I've got DoorDash on speed dial. Nearly 100% of Greenlandic Inuit have these genes, and 15% of Han Chinese, too. Europeans? A measly 2%. Which is why Brie and Parmesan cling to European waistlines like shrink wrap. Want the full science lesson on this? Let me know in the comments. Anyway, those genes also allow Inuit to stay healthy on a steady diet of fat. I tried the same thing, and my doctor ignores me now. So how does this tie back to Greenland's tiny population? Because the Inuit are the only ones truly built for it. There are only around 150,000 to 160,000 Inuit in the world. A third already live in Greenland. Everyone else, the cold, the diet, the conditions, it's like the island itself is saying, don't bother. Which is why the Norse bailed while the Thule stayed. Not that Europeans didn't try again in Greenland. In 1500, Portuguese explorer Corte Real went looking for a northwest passage. When he reached Greenland, the whole thing was iced over. So he detoured to Newfoundland, then went home and complained about Greenland's frozen seas. It was the world's first 1-star Yelp review, which kept other Europeans away. But Portugal did claim Greenland for a while in 1499, calling it Terra do Lavrador. They didn't hang on to it. 2 centuries later, Denmark swooped in, and technically Greenland's still part of Denmark, though with a strong dose of home rule. It's like living with your parents, but paying your own bills. Danish missionary Hans Gade arrived in Greenland searching for Norse settlers, who had already been gone for 200 years. That's how isolated Greenland was. Denmark then grabbed it from Portugal with zero pushback, mainly because nobody was lining up to colonize a frozen wasteland with no farmland. The Danes had the reverse luck of the Vikings. Eric the Red showed up during the medieval warm period. The sun was shining, the grass was greener. Hans Gade arrived right in the middle of the Little Ice Age. In 1776, Denmark locked down Greenland with a trade monopoly that lasted until 1950. And there's a reason for that. No cotton, no tobacco, no gold. Just ice. Not exactly the kind of colony Europe was racing to snatch. Greenland does have a lot of precious minerals, though, especially for today's industries. But they also haven't helped boost the economy. I'll get into that in a minute. In the 1950s, Denmark decided to modernize Greenland. Translation: force people out of their coastal villages and into Nuuk. Why? To make them more Danish. The result: the collapse of traditional Inuit communities. Oh, and a whole lot of generational problems. Greenland has the highest suicide rate in the world. Turns out, you can't just bulldoze centuries of culture and expect everyone to smile about it. Today, the capital of Nuuk is by far the biggest city. 40% of Greenland lives there, and as of 2023, around 19,800 people, less than your average Taylor Swift concert. Its population density is 0.36 people per square mile. It's the least densely populated place in the world. The runner-up is Mongolia, with 5.5 people per square mile. That's over 15 times denser than Greenland. And Mongolia is mostly desert, steppe, and Genghis Khan descendants. But hey, aren't we all? Greenland sits next to the northernmost reaches of Canada, aka the place where almost no one lives, aka Tundra Land. Even its southern tip lines up with balmy Anchorage, Alaska. Not exactly palm trees and cocktails. No wonder Eric the Red had to gaslight people into moving there. 2/3 of the island, above the Arctic Circle, right in the polar zone. Arctic winters are brutal, sometimes plunging to -58 degrees Fahrenheit. The average? 10 degrees Fahrenheit between January and March, and Nuuk summers limp along at 46 degrees Fahrenheit. The average year-round temperature in the capital, 31 degrees, the kind of weather that would wipe out half of Los Angeles. And here's another reason people don't crowd Greenland's coasts. It barely rains up north. The Northeast is technically an Arctic desert. It gets less rainfall than the Sahara, and fewer camels. In the south, where most people live, it's much better, around 35 inches annually, the same as Chicago. Down in the wetter south, farming is still on hard mode. The only thing that works? Sheep, and only at Greenland's southernmost tip. And then there's the soil, which is lousy. In 2022, only 0.6% of Greenland's land was used for agriculture. That makes it one of the countries with the least arable land in the world. I guess it's good to be known for something, though. Glaciers really did a number on Greenland. They stripped off most of the soil, leaving behind rock-hard, pun intended, bedrock. In the south and west, you're basically gardening on solid rock. Down here, the ground's 3.8 billion years old. Great for geology bragging rights, but terrible for farming. Okay, maybe I'm being too hard on Greenland. There is some soil in the south, described as acidic and coarsely textured. It's also afraid of water. Great. A study of 23 cultivated sites in South Greenland found 99% was hydrophobic. 98% was extremely hydrophobic. Greenland's dirt has some commitment issues. This has made another resource very hard to grow and find in Greenland. Take a look at an aerial view of Greenland. Notice something missing? Trees. The World Bank says only 0.00054% of Greenland is forested. Basically, just Tsinghua Valley in the south. A percentage so tiny, most reports just round it down to 0. Any ideas why? It's not the cold. Exposed bedrock is one reason. The lack of quality soil is another. Fancy one more? Greenland's way too far from any seed-rich neighborhood. Russia, birds and wind can spread seeds from lush regions across the country. Greenland's closest neighbor, the Canadian tundra, not exactly a friendly seed donor. The nearest greenery is 500 miles in Iqaluit and nearly 850 miles in Newfoundland and Labrador. Way too far for birds or wind to do Greenland any favors. No trees means no timber and no easy fires. But the Inuit had a hack: seal fat oil. It kept their homes lit and warm. Forget use every part of the buffalo, they used every part of the seal. So, there's little farming, no timber. What other industries does Greenland support? Great question. The answer is not a whole lot. Yet another reason people don't live there. There just isn't enough of an economy and jobs to support them. The number one industry is fishing. Fish and fish products made up 87% of Greenland's exports in 2019. Seals and whales can't be exported because of their protected status. They have to be eaten locally, and there's a quota of how many can be hunted, which means Greenland imports nearly all of its food. Result, one of the most expensive places to live on Earth. Cost of living 44% higher than the US. A family of 4, over $6,000 a month, not including rent. And milk, $10 a gallon. Welcome to Greenland. And it makes sense. Nothing can be made locally. There's barely any infrastructure to move it around. Supply ships from North America and Europe have to swerve out of their way just to drop things off here. Greenland isn't just remote, it's a logistical nightmare. About 17.4% of Greenlandic households live in poverty. But struggling to make ends meet isn't new here. There's few industries, a heavy reliance on imports. Greenland's been a tough place to survive for centuries. Just ask the Vikings. Oh wait, you can't. They left. Greenland's government is working to expand its tourism sector, but there's a problem. Nobody could fly straight there. Until November 2024 at least, Nuuk's new runway and terminal finally let international flights land, for the first time ever. Really step one in inviting tourism in. There's plans to open 2 more airports in 2026, including another international one in Ilulissat. That meant 141,000 visitors in 2024, mostly from cruise tourism. It might not sound a lot, but it's almost 3 times the population of the island. Tourism makes up 4.9% of Greenland's GDP. It employs 6.2% of its population. Airports aren't just handy for tourists either. They're survival tools for locals. Roads? Forget it. Greenland's longest one is only 22 miles. That was built by Volkswagen as a cold weather test track, not to help anyone get groceries. These days, tourists drive it, locals don't bother. In Nuuk, boats outnumber cars, and only 5.3% of Greenlanders even own one. And no wonder. Greenlandic roads go nowhere, literally. They exist only inside towns and just stop at the edge. Even the tarmac gives up. The options in the summer? Plane, boat, and helicopter. Pretty horrible for anyone who's a nervous flyer. Some settlements don't have runways for planes. That's why helicopters are used for the smaller areas. In winter, boats are nearly unusable because of the floating ice death traps everywhere. Snowmobiles and dog sleds take over as the main way to travel. More practical, less sinky. Don't expect to find any trains. Greenland's got less people than Flagstaff, Arizona. You don't build freeways for ghost towns on ice. Greenland's isolation makes even the internet a luxury. The island's on 2 internet cables, to Iceland and Canada. There's satellite if you're unlucky enough to live up north. The result? Internet that costs between $115 and $158 a month, nearly twice the US average. And it still buffers. Greenland's government is eyeing mining as its next big industry. Problem is, foreign powers are suddenly very interested. Nothing makes a small population nervous like realizing they're sitting on a rock the whole world suddenly wants to dig up. The island's massive ice sheet is melting, losing up to 110 million Olympic-sized swimming pools every year. That means more minerals get accessible, year by year. Greenland isn't just about oil and gas. It's sitting on a treasure chest of modern must-haves. Graphite, lithium, and rare earths. The same stuff you need for Teslas, wind turbines, and lots of military toys. Right now, China's got a monopoly. 72% of US imports, 100% of Europe's. Suddenly, Greenland looks pretty attractive. But getting to the minerals isn't as easy. Most are still sitting under ice or bedrock. The island's got a tiny workforce, almost no infrastructure, and environmental rules stricter than your mom's room cleaning checklist. And mining? That's messy. Sure, when climate change melts the ice, mining will be easy. But by then, we'll probably all be dead. Hang on. Other cold, icy places have done well for themselves. Iceland and Alaska are smaller than Greenland, yet they've got more people. Yeah, but Iceland and Alaska have something else going for them. Better locations. Alaska is an important transportation hub. FedEx has a huge center in Anchorage. That's thanks to its location near the top of the globe. Planes can get to almost anywhere in the northern hemisphere in 10 hours. It's also connected to the mainland. Iceland is smack dab in the middle of the Atlantic, between Europe and North America. It also has the Gulf Stream going for it. You know, that thing that keeps continental Europe way warmer than it should be? It swings by Iceland first. It doesn't hit it directly, but it does get much closer to the island. Plus, Iceland has a lot of geothermal activity to keep it warm. And that warmth lets Icelanders farm things. Also, the fact that only 10 to 14% of Iceland is covered in glaciers, unlike Greenland's 80%. Iceland lucked out with fewer glaciers, so its seas aren't as clogged with floating death traps. Greenland, not so much. Even today, icebergs are still ship smashers. In just the last decade, the Mary Arctica container ship and the Tugalliq trawler both learned that the hard way. Icebergs don't just go after big ships. They also threaten Greenland's villages. If they're not drifting straight into town, they're blocking boats and making fishing a gamble. In July of 2025, Inarssuit got a reminder of just how awkward icebergs can be. One drifted into its harbor, which, for a fishing village only reachable by boat or plane, that's not great news. But 2025 was nothing compared to 2018. An iceberg weighing 10 million tons dumped itself outside town, visible from space. The whole village of 200 was evacuated. The iceberg could have caused huge tsunami-like waves. And it's Greenland, remember? There's nowhere inland for the villagers to go if that happens. Just another natural threat to survival in Greenland. Greenland didn't get Iceland's perks. No decent farmland or a prime trade location, but now the ice is melting. And suddenly, Greenland looks like it might get a growing season. Already 2 to 3 weeks longer, maybe even 100 days in the future. Which would be great, except for the whole drought thing. Classic Greenland. Droughts are causing huge problems for sheep farmers. Greenland's pastures are drying out. Sheep farms are dwindling. The country's only commercial cattle farmer, Sophus Fredriksson, summed it up. No new jobs have been created, and agriculture is on its knees. When your entire national beef industry is one guy and he's waving the white flag, that's not a good sign. There are only 38 sheep farmers in the country. Why are sheep so important? They make up 99% of Greenland's farmed meat. Without sheep, Greenland's only domestic meat production will be marine mammals and a couple of cows. So Greenland's trying a new angle: agrotourism. Tourists hike from hut to hut, get crash courses in farming and wool making, and sometimes crash on the farmer's couch. It's all under the Wool in the North program, running across the North Atlantic. Greenland's newest problem? Wildfires. Yeah, the ice island's catching fire now. In 2017 and 2019, blazes near Sisimiut were so remote that satellites spotted them before people did. When NASA knows your forest is on fire before you do, that's not a great sign. Warm temperatures have led to more fires. On the day of the 2019 wildfire, the temperature was 68 degrees Fahrenheit. That might sound like a breezy spring day, but for Greenland, that's crazy high. The normal high temperature for that area in July is 50 degrees Fahrenheit, and heat coupled with dry tundra grasses creates a tinderbox. Climate change might be giving Greenland longer summers and new industries, but it's not bringing in new residents. Birth rates are dropping, people keep moving away. By 2040, the working age population is set to shrink by 16%. Fewer workers, same amount of ice. So if you think nobody lives in Greenland now, it's going to get that much worse in the future, unless something drastic changes. Thanks for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you want to see more videos like this, then please consider subscribing and turn on notifications. Really does make a difference. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time on MatPack. 2 states, 1 border, and somehow 2 completely different realities. In January of 2025, one of these states had 274,000 job openings, more than double what it had a decade before. Right next door, around 124,000 vacancies during the same period. In 2024, one of these states generated over $760 billion in economic output. Its neighbor, around $320 billion. 2 numbers. One massive economic gap. From space, they almost look identical. So why did one become a rocket ship while the other got left behind? The Carolinas have a lot in common. The same climate, a similar coastline. That's why they were once one colony. Even today, the two states are surprisingly similar. The median age? Almost the same. Median income? In the same ballpark. The population's even grown at about the same rate since 1960. South Carolina should be ripe for growth. It's a massive, fertile low country, a place full of islands and marshes, rivers, and deltas. It's perfect for growing crops like rice, indigo, and later on, cotton. And there was something even better to go with the low country, a port. So, Charleston sprang to life, and that's why South Carolina is unusual. Areas with major ports tend to grow pretty quickly. South Carolina just had too many problems. So Charleston never became the center of a huge metro area. Small towns and big plantations sprang up instead to take advantage of the low country's growing conditions. It was rural, not urban. North Carolina's geography didn't let it go all in on cotton, so it had no choice but to diversify its economy. Fortunately, the Tar Heel state had a secret weapon to do it, something South Carolina never did. North Carolina's Piedmont isn't just bigger. It's at the fall line. All that water falling in one place meant there was a lot of energy available. South Carolina used its own fall line to power mills. They sprang up all over the place. Sawmills, grist mills, textile mills, pretty much any kind of mill. North Carolina's geography forced it to diversify its trade and industry much earlier, though. What does that add up to? Big towns. While South Carolina has only 3 cities with a population over 100,000, North Carolina has 10. North Carolina urbanized fast. South Carolina doubled down on plantations, but not necessarily because that's what either state wanted. It's just what the map demanded. If you've traveled along the eastern seaboard, you know I-95. But in North Carolina, it was 2 different highways, I-85 and I-40, and that did something much bigger. In North Carolina, the Piedmont and the Fall Line work together, like a self-reinforcing system. They help each other grow. That's why North Carolina is a curiosity among East Coast states. Most major cities hug the coast, but here, they're pushed inland. That became very important for the destiny of both of the Carolinas. For South Carolina, I-95 was a problem. It doesn't run through or near Charleston, so the port gets bypassed. But in North Carolina, I-85 and I-40 connected the inland cities. And they did something bigger. They rewired the economic geography of the Carolinas. When the federal government began building the interstate highway system in the 1950s, the goal wasn't economic development, it was defense. The idea was to move troops and equipment across the country as fast as possible if war broke out. But highways do something else. They decide who thrives and who doesn't. I-95 cuts straight down the eastern side of the state. Running across the middle is I-40, and I-85 cuts diagonally through the Piedmont before heading toward Atlanta. Those highways created something incredibly valuable, a transportation spine running directly through North Carolina. Suddenly, the state's cities weren't isolated manufacturing towns anymore. They were nodes in a network. Goods could move quickly between them. Workers could commute between them. Companies could build distribution centers. But this corridor didn't just move goods. It quietly changed where the best jobs would go and where the next generation of graduates would stay. In the 1950s, North Carolina made the single decision that would change everything for it: a research center. And the ingredients to make it a success were there. North Carolina had excellent universities that were producing the engineers, scientists, and researchers the growing economy needed. Duke, Chapel Hill, North Carolina State University. The Research Triangle Park opened for business, perfectly timed with the I-40 corridor's growth. Apple, Toyota, and others moved in, creating thousands of higher-wage jobs and giving graduates a reason to stay. Over time, this hub reinforced the Piedmont Triad, attracting even more companies and skilled workers. It set the stage for the next wave of economic growth. The idea of setting up a hub for industry near the ready labor source of North Carolina's universities paid off. South Carolina bet on factories. but North Carolina bet on ideas. Geography gave the Tar Heel state an edge, but projects like building the Research Triangle turned potential into momentum. South Carolina has never developed the same way. There's no continuous corridor running through the center of the state, no interior spine connecting universities, research hubs, manufacturing centers, and major airports. Instead, South Carolina's biggest economic assets are pretty spread apart. Charleston on the coast, Columbia inland, Greenville up near the mountains. Sure, they're connected, but they're not concentrated. North Carolina's highways, on the other hand, stitched its economy together into one long corridor of growth. By the time the interstate system was finished, North Carolina had something South Carolina didn't: a continuous economic corridor running through the state. That corridor would become the foundation for everything that came next. But before highways rewired the Carolinas, another industry had already shaped their economies. Textiles became the backbone of the Palmetto State's economy by the turn of the 20th century. But the collapse of those mills in the late 20th century still shapes the state today. Many former mill towns face lower incomes and slower job growth than the national average. North Carolina? Not so much. Help came from across the sea. BMW needed a plant in the U.S. Selling cars to the huge American market without shipping them across the Atlantic was a no-brainer. But they wanted a right-to-work state where they wouldn't have to bargain with a strong labor union. Much of South Carolina's future was riding on that plant. The result? The plant grew so much that it now makes over 400,000 vehicles a year. It's now BMW's largest factory in the world. But the biggest win was who else was paying attention. In 2009, Boeing made a huge decision. It went across the country to North Charleston. The state offered multiple incentives: lower labor costs, lower taxes, a good relationship with the U.S. military, and, crucially, a way to build planes in a non-union right-to-work state without the threat of labor strikes. South Carolina even offered to spend taxpayer money to help train the workers Boeing would hire. Columbia shelled out $60 million on special job programs between 2009 and 2022. And Boeing brought a boom with it. It has a legion of parts suppliers working with it. Those parts suppliers have come to South Carolina too. There are now over 400 aerospace and aviation companies in the state. If you're a supplier, you want to be close to where the action is. Just like in North Carolina, it saves on shipping. South Carolina succeeded in attracting factories. But factories don't create the next industry, they help assemble the last one. And that's what makes an economy more vulnerable. When one of those manufacturers runs into trouble, the shock doesn't stay inside the factory walls. Alarm bells started ringing almost as soon as Boeing's plant opened in North Charleston. The FAA discovered manufacturing and quality control flaws that eventually forced them to block all new Dreamliner deliveries. The production lines in South Carolina slowed down. Between 2000 and 2024, the Palmetto State lost 71,000 manufacturing jobs. North Carolina suffered too, losing over 300,000 manufacturing jobs during that same period before stabilizing. In fact, North Carolina lost about 7,200 manufacturing jobs in 2025. But unlike South Carolina, North Carolina had a diversified economy. Industries and urban corridors spread risk across the state, softening the blow of lost factories. It's another piece of the divide that keeps the Carolinas on a very different path. But in the early 2020s, something shifted. The pandemic reshaped how millions of Americans work. Geography suddenly mattered again. Employees could choose where they wanted to live. Across the country, educated workers began moving south. They wanted lower housing costs, warmer weather, growing cities. And when they looked at the Carolinas, that choice wasn't equal. Charlotte had become one of America's biggest banking centers. The Piedmont Corridor had universities and major corporate offices. South Carolina offered something very different: manufacturing jobs, tourism, logistics. Those are important industries, sure. They employ hundreds of thousands of people, but they don't attract the same kind of migration. Highly educated workers tend to cluster around innovation hubs, not assembly lines. Geography might have given North Carolina an edge with the fall line and cheap land, but the region only reached its full potential because of smart policy changes. In 1960, there were about 4.5 million people living in North Carolina. It hit around 11.2 million in July of 2025. The influx of jobs might have pushed rents and home prices higher than South Carolina. Surprisingly, they didn't. In late 2024, the median home price was $376,000 in the north and $381,000 in the south. Small differences on paper, but over time, they set the stage for a shift few could ignore. And hey, if this kind of deep dive is your thing, hit subscribe. There's more coming. For a young, college-educated worker, there's really no reason not to move to North Carolina. For much of the 20th century, graduates from North Carolina universities had little reason to stay. Technology, finance, research, the jobs simply weren't there at the time. Slowly, though, the region built something powerful, an ecosystem. And once an ecosystem forms, it begins to attract with its own gravity. Workers from other states started arriving. By the 2000s, North Carolina had something South Carolina didn't, again. A dense concentration of high-skilled jobs clustered close together. Every engineer who moves to Raleigh increases the odds that a startup forms there. Every finance graduate who moves to Charlotte strengthens the city's banking sector. Every researcher who joins a lab in Durham adds to the region's intellectual capital. Opportunity attracts people, and people create more opportunities. That feedback loop can reshape entire regions. Today, the economic difference between the two Carolinas is visible, even from space. At night, satellite images show clusters of light stretching across North Carolina's interior. Charlotte to the Triad to the Triangle. A corridor of cities tied together by infrastructure, universities, and industries that feed off one another. South Carolina has bright spots too. Charleston glows along the coast, Greenville in the northwest. But between them, the lights thin out. That difference isn't just geography anymore. It's momentum. North Carolina invents, South Carolina builds. Innovation versus production defines the modern divide. And that is the Carolina Gap. Thanks for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you want to see more videos like this, then please consider subscribing and turn on notifications. It really does make a difference. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time on MapPack. There are some beautiful cities in the US. And then there are some where local school districts use a flag system to let people know if they can breathe the air outside that day. In one city, the water is completely undrinkable, while in another, you're gonna be slammed by dust storms. These are 40 US cities that are in the worst possible spot. Number 40, Bullhead City, Arizona. Usually, cities have to deal with intense heat and droughts or flooding. But what if you found a city that dealt with both? Enter Bullhead City, Arizona. Its odd and extreme weather is partly due to its unique location in the Mojave Desert, yet on the Colorado River. On average, temperatures will reach 100 degrees Fahrenheit, 37.7 Celsius, around 135 days a year. Worse yet, as temperatures are also rising over time, by 2050, the temperature will pass 113 degrees Fahrenheit, 45 Celsius, approximately 42 days a year. Almost a month and a half. However, maybe some residents can cool down when their homes flood, as 37% of Bullhead City homes are at risk of flooding from the nearby river, and 85% of buildings are at risk of wildfire. Insurance companies have a field day here. Number 39, Kansas City, Kansas. One good thing you can say about Kansas City is that housing is cheap. The bad thing is that housing is cheap because it seems that not a lot of people want to live there. Kansas City has the strange distinction of having fewer bars, museums, libraries, recreational centers, and restaurants than the US as a whole, even though it's a metro area. There are 120 restaurants per 100,000 Kansas City residents, and it has one of the lowest restaurants per capita of any city in the US. Perhaps the city's biggest problem is that it's right across the state border from and almost part of Kansas City, Missouri, which is generally considered a much more fun town. That's why 150,000 people live in Kansas City, Kansas, while Kansas City, Missouri has attracted over 500,000. Number 38. Hartford, Connecticut. Most locals and residents in Hartford think of it more like an office park to be commuted into than an actual city with amenities people want to use. And in the generally wealthy state of Connecticut, Hartford somehow manages to have a poverty rate of 25.5%. In fact, it usually ranks in the 10 poorest cities in the country. The city was once a hub for manufacturing and insurance, and while some insurance companies remain, a lot of jobs have shifted outwards. In turn, Hartford lost 13% of its population in the 1990s alone, almost equal to the percentage of jobs that moved out at that time. This led to failing public schools thanks to a smaller tax base and fewer opportunities for new generations to get better jobs. Number 37, Amarillo, Texas. If you're looking for a city to sweep you off your feet, head to Amarillo, Texas, because the wind just might do that. Amarillo has been declared the windiest city in the US, as it sits in the middle of the Great Plains area. For those who hate dry conditions, dust storms kicking up all the time, or who suffer from allergies, Amarillo is like its own special version of hell. Worse yet, when the wind is blowing from a specific direction, i.e. from the general area of the cow pastures near it, the smell of manure often permeates the air. Number 36. New York City, New York. New York is famously the city that never sleeps. But in fact, some people like sleeping. But good luck getting those Z's if you're in New York, as it easily outranks every other urban area in the US as the noisiest city in the country. It has the highest population density by far, with just over 29,000 people per square mile. 3 times the nightlife venues of any other US city, and a lot of public transit shaking the ground day and night. If all that weren't enough, about 3,000 flights per day pass right over the city coming from 3 different major NYC area airports. Even with the strongest earplugs in the world, that's a lot to keep you awake. No wonder New Yorkers get a reputation for being cranky. Number 35. Fargo, North Dakota. Best known for starring in a Frances McDormand movie, Fargo is the biggest city in North Dakota. But perhaps more problematically than that, Fargo, with only 133,000 people, is the biggest city by far for hours in any direction. It's 253 miles, 407 kilometers to Minneapolis-St. Paul, and 390 miles, 628 kilometers to Omaha, Nebraska, a 6-hour drive. In fact, Winnipeg, Canada is technically the closest big city, 209 miles, 336 kilometers away. As one resident puts it online, it is geographically one of the most boring and uninspiring places in the United States. It's flat and windy and cold, and while it's decently safe with good education systems, there just isn't much to do. Getting around in the winter months can be kind of a hassle as well, with snow on the ground from about mid-November to mid-April. Number 34. Los Angeles, California. LA has a lot going for it. Sunshine and pleasant temperatures almost year-round, the Pacific Ocean, and palm trees, just to name a few. But in addition to an out-of-control cost of living crisis, it also ranks as the most polluted and smog-filled place in the US. Not to mention the increasing effects of climate change on the city. There are extended droughts affecting water supply and usage in the country's second-largest metro area, and wildfires making many homes almost uninsurable is making life in the city harder year by year. The average price of a home is $1 million. Well, $978,157 if you want to be exact. And since the median savings balance for US households was $8,000 as of 2022, it means the average American can buy a home here never. Number 33. Fairbanks, Alaska. There are some great things to do in Fairbanks. See the Northern Lights, go dog sledding, and freeze to death far away from any major urban population centers. As pretty as a visit to the city can be, living here is a very different story. First of all, while you might imagine Alaska having some of the cleanest air in the country, that's definitely not the case in Fairbanks. The American Lung Association ranked Fairbanks as one of the most polluted cities for year-round particle pollution. This is mostly thanks to wildfire smoke in the summer and constant wood burning in the winter. At least there's not much reason to be outside, as Fairbanks also ranks as the coldest city in the US.
In January, the minimum average temperature is negative 8.3 degrees Fahrenheit, negative 22.4 degrees Celsius, a temperature at which doctors recommend you to stay out for no longer than 30 minutes to avoid frostbite.
So if the pollution doesn't get you in Fairbanks, the cold might.
Number 32.
Dallas, Texas. As in many Texas urban areas, it seems Dallas forgot to put the city in their city. It's an endless sprawl of cookie-cutter suburban neighborhoods with very few amenities for a city of 1.3 million. It's also located on the flat Texas scrublands that makes it extremely hot during June to September, with temperatures over 90 degrees Fahrenheit for 143 days a year on average, and prone to high winds and ice storms in the winter. And any winter storms also tend to make the power grid break down, as Texas is the only state that insists on running its own electrical grid. As one resident says, Dallas has everything you need and nothing you want. Oh, and Dallas is also located in the southern region of Tornado Alley, so it has that going for it.
Number 31.
Stockton, California. Both Interstate 5 and Highway 99 run right through Stockton, connecting it to the Bay Area, the state capital of Sacramento, and LA. But these highways also accelerated Stockton's deterioration. Highway 99 passed by the rundown sections of Stockton, not its active port or shady tree-lined residential streets that city managers would rather showcase. Because of the high volume of Californians that drove this route, Stockton had acquired a bad reputation. So, developers decided to build I-5 in the 70s, destroy long-standing, mostly minority communities, and let the city's downtown decay in favor of showing off the nice parts. Then, Stockton rapidly expanded north along the freeway, with many low-density, single-family homes that severely strained city resources, eventually leading to Stockton being branded the foreclosure capital of the world.
Number 30.
Youngstown, Ohio. Since the 1950s, Youngstown has experienced a 65% drop in population. From just over 168,000 people in 1950, the population dropped to around 58,000 as of 2025. Poverty and crime in the area is relatively high. So why has Youngstown been hit so hard? Well, the city lies on the Mahoning River, which was previously the heart of America's steel production, with 22 miles, 35 kilometers of steel mills on its banks, until September 19th, 1977, which became known as Black Monday in the steel industry, as increased automation and foreign imports started shuttering businesses. That was the day Youngstown Sheet and Tube fired 5,000 workers at once. Then, U.S. Steel shut down Ohio Works, also in Youngstown, leaving 2,800 workers out of a job, and Jones and Laughlin Steel Corporation followed suit. Within a decade, 50,000 Youngstown jobs, most of them in steel, were eliminated. Number 29. New Orleans, Louisiana. Hurricanes have repeatedly devastated New Orleans, which has the unfortunate distinction of both being right on the Gulf of Mexico and incredibly low in elevation. This means hurricanes are more likely to hit, and when they do, the city floods. The most devastating hurricane in the last 20 years was Hurricane Katrina, which caused $160 billion in damage to the city. When you're not getting slammed by nature's rage, thanks to the large bodies of water nearby, you're still living in the most humid city in the US, with an average humidity of 75.9%, otherwise known as unbearable. Number 28. Albuquerque, New Mexico. Perhaps there's a reason why Breaking Bad was set in Albuquerque. It's one of the most dangerous cities in the country, with a violent crime rate of 51 per 1,000 residents, as opposed to 22.7 in the entire country. That means in any given year living in Albuquerque, you have a 5% chance of becoming the victim of a violent crime. That's partly due to the city being relatively close to the US-Mexico border and the drug trafficking business that thrives there, as well as producing plenty of homegrown drugs. Number 27. Wilmington, North Carolina. Though Cape Hatteras bears the distinction of being the community with the most hurricanes per decade at 7.5, there are barely 500 people left there, probably as a result of repeated hurricanes slamming into their town. So calling it a city seems a little much. But Wilmington, with a population over 120,000 and 6 hurricanes bearing down on it per decade, fits the description much better. The most devastating hurricane on record, Hurricane Florence in 2018, not only caused $17 billion in damage throughout the state, but effectively cut Wilmington off as roads into the peninsula were blocked. Number 26. Erie, Pennsylvania. A city on a lake might sound dreamy, but that's not the case with Erie, Pennsylvania. Named after Lake Erie, whose shores it sits on, Erie has undergone a massive economic decline since its main industry, manufacturing, left it, which may be why the city now has a 26.2% poverty rate, over twice the national average. But that's far from Erie's only issue. It has a geographic problem as well. Like many Great Lakes border towns, Erie gets something called lake effect snow. When cold, dry air passes over warm water, it tends to dump snow on the other side. The city gets an average of 101 inches, 257 centimeters of snow per year, and in recent years has often been experiencing way more than that. In 2017 to 2018, the town got pelted with 166 inches, 422 centimeters of snow. Number 25, Flint, Michigan. Flint made headlines a few years ago for having undrinkable, contaminated water. But what you might not know is that things weren't going well besides that. Its location was once a big boost to its residents. What started as a lumbering area eventually became known as Vehicle City when General Motors was founded in Flint in 1908. Its GM manufacturing plant alone offered 30,000 jobs, and other auto jobs sprang up everywhere around it. But when the auto industry disappeared, the town that had been built up around it went downhill rapidly. Number 24. Bakersfield, California. Bakersfield ranks first as the most polluted city in the US. There are particles called PM 2.5, particles of 2.5 micrometers or less, that indicate how much air pollution a city has. Bakersfield has an annual average concentration of 18.8 micrograms per cubic meter. The World Health Organization recommends a PM 2.5 measurement of no more than 5 micrograms per cubic meter for long-term exposure. Though LA is famous for its smog, inland Southern California cities actually get it a lot worse. Bakersfield is in a valley parallel to the coast, trapped between the Sierra Nevada and Coast Mountain ranges. So the pollution from LA drifts inwards and then gets caught between the mountains. Local schools have to use flags to tell students how bad the pollution is any given day. Green is okay, red is bad, and purple is even worse. Number 23, St. Louis, Missouri. St. Louis, known for its famous arch, the Cardinals baseball team, and being the murder capital of the US. The homicide rate in St. Louis is 54.4 per 100,000 people, well above the average US homicide rate of 7.5. The overall violent crime rate is 1,817 per 100,000. St. Louis got hit hard by the manufacturing decline and is currently in a population freefall. As if that weren't enough, St. Louis may have one of the worst climates of any major city. What kind of weather gets on your nerves? Oppressive heat? Freezing cold? Storms? Humidity? Good news, St. Louis has it all. Because of its central position in the country, St. Louis gets hit by both Arctic cold and tropical fronts from the Gulf of Mexico. Number 22, Gastonia, North Carolina. Gastonia was once a hub of textile manufacturing, but when those jobs vanished in the 1990s, the town was left with soaring unemployment, deep poverty, and a crime rate on par with Chicago's roughest neighborhoods, just without any of the big city perks to balance it out. The problem is that residents had issues moving on to other options. Working in the textile mills didn't require a high degree of education, so other more white-collar jobs that moved into the area were harder for people to move into. In fact, 13.3% of Gastonia's population is functionally illiterate. Though with people being priced out of nearby Charlotte, the town is on a little bit of an upswing. It still has a long way to go, though. Number 21. Lubbock, Texas. There is an entire website called LubbockSucks.com dedicated to how much Lubbock sucks. That's how much hate former and current residents have for the area. Partly, it's because of the city's location in the middle of West Texas. As you will soon see with other cities on this list, West Texas is a difficult place to live, and that goes triple for anyone with allergies. The landscape is very flat, very windy, and very dusty, making things like breathing clean air or keeping anything outside your house clean an impossible feat. Lubbock has haboobs, intense dust storms several times a year, sometimes with hurricane-force winds of over 60 miles an hour. But instead of bringing torrential rain, it just raises 100-foot walls of dust. Number 20, San Bernardino, California. 6 of the worst 10 zip codes in the country when it comes to insurance non-renewals are all located in San Bernardino, mostly thanks to more and more devastating wildfires, year after year. However, blizzards play a part as well in the winter. Conditions like these have driven many people and businesses out, leading to a 32.6% poverty rate and a slow-to-dead job market. Since the city is in bad shape, some residents seek black market work or illegal relief in the form of meth, making the city and the area of the Inland Empire that surrounds it the methamphetamine capital of the United States. Number 19, Atlantic City, New Jersey. Once upon a time, Atlantic City's geography helped it grow. It was a fun seaside retreat, with a lively boardwalk as well as shops and restaurants along the beach. Now, it's known more for people smoking at slot machines in rundown casinos. In the early 20th century, people living in the Northeast went to Atlantic City as a resort destination. However, as flights to the Caribbean and Florida got super cheap, and people realized beaches in Turks and Caicos were better than coastal New Jersey, Atlantic City lost its attractiveness. In the late 1970s, the town decided to start building up casinos to get some tourists back. And it did, but cities that rely on gambling, especially if they're already on a downswing, tend to develop other problems, like crime, addiction, and poverty. Currently, Atlantic City has a 33% poverty rate and a crime rate of 87 per 1,000 people. Number 18, Mobile, Alabama. When you think of the country's rainiest cities, you may imagine places like Portland or Seattle, but the rainiest city in the US is by far Mobile, Alabama. In case you're the kind of person that thinks, great, I love the rain, you should know that might not apply in Mobile, where 21.6% of the population is depressed. Also, that rain sometimes includes hurricanes, since Mobile has the unfortunate geographic luck of sitting right on the Gulf of America, formerly known as the Gulf of Mexico. But don't worry, it doesn't rain all the time. Some days you'll only have to deal with crushing humidity, averaging 75% a year and 77% during the summer months, almost the same level you would find in a tropical rainforest. But instead, you're in Mobile. Number 17, Syracuse, New York. Another city near, though not on, the Great Lakes, Syracuse has the distinction of seeing the most precipitation per year. The city gets 110 inches, 279 centimeters of snow, 38.5 inches, 98 centimeters of rain, and generally a damp climate. If that doesn't get you down, the local 29.6% poverty rate just might. Syracuse has been in economic decline for decades now, due to the loss of metals manufacturing, an industry that used to dominate the economy in this area. Number 16, Brownsville, Texas. Brownsville took the number 1 spot in Wallet Hub's list of the unhealthiest places in the United States. No small feat for a country known for fast food chains and mammoth-sized food portions. The survey looked at categories like food, fitness, healthcare, and cases of premature death. Brownsville scored dead last in food and fitness, with limited access to fruit or vegetables or fitness centers and green spaces. Unfortunately, a lot of the unhealthy population can't get good healthcare either, as 32% of the city under 65 years old is uninsured, compared to 9.5% for the entire country. So why is Brownsville this way? In summary, the city is really poor, with an almost 25% poverty rate, incredibly hot, and has very little investment in public infrastructure or community well-being. Number 15. Lancaster, California. Lancaster has several distinctions as a city, none of which are good. It's been ranked one of the most dangerous cities in California, one of the worst to live in, having one of the longest commutes, the highest divorce rates, and perhaps as a combination of all these facts, the most stressful city in the state. Many of the problems with Lancaster lie in the city's geography and location. A lot of people who live there work in the Los Angeles area, a 70-mile, 113-kilometer at minimum commute away, and simply live in or near Lancaster for the cheap property prices. But it creates a lot of stress and resentment in a population that has to spend at least 3 hours in their car daily. Not to mention the surrounding area is arid, dusty, and really not much to look at. Number 14. Cleveland, Ohio. Forbes ranked Cleveland dead last among 71 U.S. cities for job creation. Once the 5th largest city in the U.S., Cleveland has had similar struggles as many other Rust Belt towns after the death of manufacturing, but it has fared worse than many. The city's education spending has plunged downwards, leading to difficulties for local residents seeking to move on up in life. The city ranks near the bottom of transit spending too, making it hard for people to commute. Both those factors are unattractive for new businesses looking into the area. As executive director of Policy Matters Ohio, Amy Hanauer said, if a company wants to come somewhere, they want to know they can get well-trained workers. They want to know that those folks can get to work. Not to mention that decades of local corruption have led to questionable city choices, like the building of Berkey Lakefront Airport, which takes up significant lakefront property and is used exclusively for charter and business flights. Many locals think this land could be put to better use to serve all of Cleveland. Number 13. Montgomery, Alabama. Montgomery is the state capital of Alabama, and that's pretty much it. It has a unique combination of the limited amenities of a small city with all the big city problems: property crime, poverty, and the occasional soundtrack of gunfire in the distance. However, one of the most frequent complaints about Montgomery is about the schools. According to the latest U.S. News & World Report, Alabama ranks 44th in education, which is already pretty bad. And Montgomery County ranks as the worst area in Alabama when it comes to public schools, with 14 schools failing. Lots of private schools have opened up to fix the problem, but this leaves a lot of working and lower middle-class residents stuck. The presence of so many private and magnet schools means the richest quarter of the local population doesn't care about the area's public schools. This results in one of the most underfunded educational systems in the country. Number 12. Jackson, Mississippi. Jackson, located in, you guessed it, Mississippi, which frequently ranks last on state lists for income, health, education, and several other factors, has a lot of unfortunate distinctions. It's the 8th most miserable city in the US based on a variety of factors, including a poverty rate of 32.2% and an unemployment rate of 7.7%. Some cities in a bad spot are finding themselves on an upward swing due to cheap housing prices and people moving in, but that's not the case in Jackson. In fact, it's 3rd on a list of poor US cities getting poorer, with the median income actually going down over the last few years. That's the result of a slow-motion death spiral that's gripped Jackson for decades. Regulation chipped away at the tax base, municipal services crumbled, and as the city decayed, residents fled to the suburbs. Fewer people meant even less funding, and the cycle just kept going, dragging the city down with it. Number 11. Memphis, Tennessee. According to WalletHub, Memphis, the birthplace of rock and roll, is also the most dangerous city in the US. And that's not just due to violent crime, which is off the charts. The city has a homicide rate of 43 per 100,000 people, putting it right between South Africa and Haiti. In fact, Numbeo found that Memphis is the 10th most dangerous city in the world, and it has the dubious distinction of being the only US city on the top 10 list. Memphis also ranked worst for traffic deaths in 2022, as Consumer Affairs found that there were 33 car-related deaths for every 100,000 people in Memphis. weather that produces sudden rainstorms, and fog out of nowhere. It's also due to weird local rules that state you don't need a driver's license to buy a car, and you don't need to get your car inspected. So next time you're driving through Memphis, maybe don't. Number 10. Shreveport, Louisiana. Many people who grow up in Shreveport try to find ways to leave Shreveport. It's hard to pick what's more frustrating: the poverty and stagnant job market, the crime rate, the mosquitoes, or the fact that the power goes out every time a gust of wind blows on the power lines. Things have gotten so bad that the Louisiana Public Service Commissioner, Foster Campbell, asked for a review of SWEPCO's practices, the company that handles power for most of North Louisiana. Perhaps the saddest distinction Shreveport has is that it ranked as the 156th safest city in the country out of 182. The local paper actually ran this headline, pointing out that this made Shreveport the safest urban area in Louisiana. Why? Well, because elsewhere in Louisiana is number 9, Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Baton Rouge ranked as the 179th safest city in the US out of 182 cities. That's pretty horrible, as is its location in Louisiana's infamous Cancer Alley, an 85-mile, 137-kilometer stretch of land along the Mississippi River between Baton Rouge and New Orleans, where cancer rates are almost twice the national average. That's mostly due to a lot of petrochemical plants and operations in the area, which belch toxic gases and fossil fuels into the atmosphere and the river water day after day. Antonia Yuhas, Human Rights Watch's senior researcher on fossil fuels, summarizes the problem harshly but clearly. The fossil fuel and petrochemical industry has created a sacrifice zone in Louisiana. Number 8. Houston, Texas. Imagine Dallas, but with more bugs and humidity. Oh, and dirt. That's right, Lawn Start ranked Houston the dirtiest city in the country based on a combination of pollution, living conditions, infrastructure, and overall cleanliness. And we're not kidding about the bugs. Houston ranked first in household cockroach infestations, thanks mostly to its heat, humidity, and, well, not great standard of cleanliness. It was also the 3rd city in metric tons of greenhouse gas emissions from local facilities, and 5th in sewage disposal breakdowns. All the lists no one ever wants to be a part of. It also ranks as the riskiest state for homeownership, thanks to a combination of floods, 64% of homes at risk, extreme heat, 98% of homes at risk, and hurricanes. Number 7. Detroit, Michigan. Unfortunately, Detroit has gotten such a bad reputation as a city that it's almost a punchline. Though its leaders have invested in regenerating its downtown area, it consistently ranks as one of the poorest cities in the country, with a median income of just over $24,000 per capita as of 2023. The glory days of the nation's former car manufacturing capital are long gone, and its residents aren't doing too well outside of finances either. Detroit ranked as the least healthy city in the US. It has the highest percentage of adults with diabetes, 18.2%, the highest percentage of adults with obesity, 45.5%, and the highest percentage of adults who smoke, 28.5%. It also has the second highest rate of heart disease deaths per 100,000 residents, and the second highest rate of opioid overdose deaths per 100,000 residents. So, if you want to live a long, healthy, successful life, this probably isn't the best place. Number 6. Toledo, Ohio. Many cities in the Rust Belt have been hit hard. But Toledo, as some locals who moved away would say, it's the Ohio of Ohio. Though some things have been improving, the violent crime rate still sits at 1,146 per 100,000, double the national average. And the poverty rate of the city is more than double the national rate, 23.3% compared to 11.5%. Its lakeside location has also caused some issues in the past, as toxic algae blooms contaminated the entire water supply, and residents were unable to drink, bathe, cook, or brush their teeth. Number 5. Baltimore, Maryland. The story of Baltimore's decline is an all too familiar one for many US cities. Deindustrialization got rid of many decently paying jobs, rapidly increasing poverty and its associated problems, including the most overdose deaths of any US city with around 1,000 in 2023, 921 of those from fentanyl. However, Baltimore is finding it almost impossible to bounce back due to a geographic anomaly. It is one of the country's only independent cities, meaning it's not part of a county, so it literally can't grow beyond its current boundaries. So when some neighborhoods got crime-ridden and bad, and we mean bad, as Baltimore often ranked second or third in US cities with the most crime, and people left, they just left the city entirely. And the city literally can't annex the surrounding areas or expand into them to try to rehaul itself. Number 4. Odessa, Texas. Don't drink the water. That's one of the first things every Odessa resident will tell you. See, what brought Odessa wealth and overpriced rent was the local oil and gas industry. It also brought benzene and hydrogen sulfide, releasing it into the air and water table. In 2022, air analysts smelled something like rotten eggs in the air, then found that hydrogen sulfide levels had risen to 82 times their acceptable levels for residential areas. At high levels, hydrogen sulfide causes respiratory infections, dizziness, nausea, headaches, decreased lung function, and increased cancer risks. As a bonus, there's also a Superfund site in the area, a site designated for cleanup by the EPA, contaminated with chromium left over from chrome plating operations in the 60s and 70s. As for the upsides of the area, well, it's honestly hard to find any. It's dusty, windy, with a high crime rate, and not a whole lot to do. The usual bonus of cities no one hates is crazy low housing prices, but Odessa doesn't even have that. Home prices average around $500,000. Number 3. Gary, Indiana. Gary used to be known as the murder capital of the US. However, while it's still shady, crime has fallen a bit in recent years. That might be because since 1960, 61% of Gary's population has just left. Another Rust Belt town that started rapidly declining when its primary industries left, Gary still actually has a steel mill in operation, and that makes matters worse. The U.S. steel plant emits nitrogen oxide and soot, leaving what visitors describe as a horrible metallic smell in the air, leading to lots of nose and throat irritation in the local population. It's also the plant with one of the highest carbon pollution footprints in the U.S., emitting 10.3 million tons of greenhouse gases in 2021 alone. As you can imagine, this makes Gary a difficult place to be. Number 2. Camden, New Jersey. People who grew up in towns around Camden were taught one thing: avoid driving through Camden, especially at night. For about 2 decades, Camden has been ranked between number 1 and number 5 on lists of most dangerous US cities. Your chance of becoming a victim of violent crime there is 1 in 59. But that's not the only reason why this 70,000-person town has lost almost half its population since 1950. The city's largest former industries and employers, RCA Victor, Campbell's Soup, and the New York Shipbuilding Corporation, all either shut down or moved most of their industrial activity outside of Camden to avoid unions. This caused massive unemployment, which in turn led to poverty, substance abuse, and increased crime. Though efforts have been made to turn the city around, Camden's current poverty rate still sits at around 28.5%. And finally, number 1. Pharr, Texas. The 80,000-person city of Pharr is one of the poorest places in the country. The median household income is approximately $32,000, while almost 38% of residents make under $25,000. This would be bad enough for most cities, but in Pharr, it's just the beginning. Pharr also ranks incredibly low when it comes to healthcare access, 500th in the country, family and food security, 496th, environmentally, 483rd, and in terms of economic stability, 475th. Basically, it doesn't crack the top 450 cities in the US on almost any metric, except possibly housing affordability. But after hearing all this, investing in a home there shouldn't sound like too good of an idea anyway. Thanks for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you want to see more videos like this, then please consider subscribing and turn on notifications. It really does make a difference. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time on Map Pack. The Pacific, a massive puddle of blue stretching forever. Home to sharks, giant squid, and, let's be honest, probably a few sea monsters. Scattered across this ocean, tiny islands. Think palm trees, coconuts, hammocks swaying in the breeze. Paradise, right? Well, not exactly. Because despite all that tropical charm, hardly anyone actually lives out here. Why? Let's find out. And no, it's not for the reason you think. Take a look at the Pacific. Almost 64 million square miles of pure oceanic overkill. Scattered across this watery chaos are tiny islands and atolls. They're all grouped under one fancy label, Oceania. And at the center of it all, Australia. It's got almost all the land, most of the money, and still barely half the people. New Zealand and Papua New Guinea are the only real co-stars in what's basically the Australia show, and even then, it's guest appearances. Take those three out, and what's left? 3.6 million people scattered across the biggest swimming pool on Earth. That's not a region, that's a long-distance relationship. One that's explosive. In 2022, Tonga's Hunga Tonga Hunga Ha'apai submarine volcano decided to cosplay as 1883 Krakatoa, a literal undersea fireworks show that cost $90 million, about 19% of Tonga's GDP. Imagine your house exploding and then realizing your entire bank account was in it. And it's not just Tonga. The whole area sits on the Pacific Ring of Fire. It's a tectonic mosh pit. Fiji, the Solomons, Vanuatu, all sitting on a crust that can and does throw tantrums. Other islands aren't volcanic, but they might wish they were. You'll see why soon. They're all coral atolls, islands made out of things that used to be alive. The planet's most scenic graveyards. Coral grows, dies, and leaves behind skeletons, which eventually pile up into postcard-worthy islands. Gorgeous to look at, terrible to live on. Like a luxury apartment with no plumbing. Fresh water? That's the boss level. Not because it doesn't exist, but because finding it's a scavenger hunt designed by a sadist. Take Niue. It's a raised coral atoll where people literally had to crawl through caves just to find drinkable water. Wells, useless. Niue gets a little help from New Zealand, the responsible friend, but most islands, nope, they're on their own. Better hope it rains, or, die. And the best part? Coral is porous. Water runs through it like office gossip through a work Christmas party. It's impossible to stop. It forms a freshwater layer underground. Thin, fragile, and one rogue wave away from turning into seawater soup. Remember that for later. It's gonna come back, like your ex after you start doing well. So how do you grow when you can barely drink? Even the US wrestles with water shortages, and that place has billionaires launching bottled water into space. Out here, surrounded by ocean, clean water is rarer than a Yankees World Series win. Yeah, I said it. And it's not just about drinking. Crops like coconuts and breadfruit need water too. No water means no food. Desalination could help, but that's like saying a Ferrari could help you get to work. Sure, if you could afford one. Most islands can't. So people adapt. Or leave, because paradise looks a lot less tropical when your tap spits out salt water. There's another thing holding the Pacific Islands back: the ground. Most islands don't have soil worth bragging about. Coral just isn't built for farming. It's nature's concrete. Take Niue, for example. It has a thin layer of dirt barely deep enough for weeds. Other islands? They torched what little fertile soil they had, trying to jumpstart their economies. For millions of years, Nauru was a giant bird bathroom break, and birds are extremely generous. Their droppings fossilized into phosphate, a fertilizer goldmine. People started digging, and suddenly, Nauru was rich. Like 1960s Saudi Arabia with coconuts rich. But then the phosphate ran out. The money vanished, and the land was left looking like a toxic wasteland. Today, Nauru gets by selling citizenships and taking Australian aid to clean up the mess. Not every island's cursed, though. Fiji lucked out.
Volcanoes gave it good soil and real water, a tropical cheat code. That's why you see Fiji water in stores, and why it's a heavyweight in sugar and fish exports. With nearly 1 million people, it's the biggest economy in Oceania outside the Australia, New Zealand, Papua New Guinea trio. Fiji's the one island that figured out how to read the manual while everyone else is still pressing random buttons. But even Fiji hits a wall. It can't feed itself. Most of its food, things like wheat and rice, comes from Australia and New Zealand. Australia alone covers nearly 40% of Fiji's food market. Even its bottled water comes from abroad. Despite being the 4th largest water exporter in the world, but still imports bottled water from Italy, China, and the US. Make it make sense. It's like selling umbrellas and still getting wet. Manufactured goods, forget it. Cars, planes, electronics, fuel, almost everything's imported. According to the World Bank, about 70% of Fiji's total goods and services come from overseas. The trade is worth more than its entire GDP. Fiji just doesn't have the infrastructure to make much on its own. It's like running a lemonade stand where you have to import the lemons, the sugar, the cups, and the stand. The saving grace? Ports. Lots of them. Suva, Lautoka, Levuka, Vuda, Malau, Rotuma, Wairiki, they're all managed by Fiji Ports Corporation. They keep the whole island from drowning in an economic tsunami. They're the island's arteries, pumping life and imports in and out. Other islands aren't so lucky. The Solomon Islands has 2 ports, Tuvalu has 1, and the ocean is trying to drown that one. Nauru doesn't even have a real port, just a glorified dock where big ships unload onto tiny barges that ferry goods to shore. It's slow, expensive, and completely at the mercy of the weather. And you thought Amazon Prime was slow, but Nauru is trying to fix that. They're building a proper port from scratch, ambitious for a coral island with no harbor, little money, and way too much ocean. Every shipment crawls across thousands of miles, and bad weather turns delayed delivery into a way of life. But building on coral is surgery with a sledgehammer. You have to dredge the reef, pour concrete walls, and hope it holds. Think China's artificial islands, minus the geopolitics, plus existential dread. The cost? Wrecking the island. Nauru's foundation isn't rock. It's fossilized sea life. It's fragile stuff that erodes faster than my career aspirations. And that coral sand that helps hold fresh water? It's light, airy, and gets hammered non-stop by waves. So when it's not dissolving, it's disintegrating. Remember this. It's going to be important soon. So Nauru's still trying to finish its port. With Australia's help, of course. The project kicked off in 2019, right before the world caught fire. The pandemic hit, work slowed, and the shiny new port that was supposed to open in 2020 got delayed at the low price of an additional 15 million Australian dollars. And the new opening date, nobody knows. Soon, eventually. Why are you asking me? Even when it's done, the world will have moved on. A 2020-era port in a 2050 ocean. But don't think this kind of mess only happens to the smaller islands. Let's talk about Wake Island. You've probably heard the name. Turns out, it's another coral atoll made up of Wake, Peel, and Wilkes Islands. It's administered by the US, claimed by the Marshall Islands, and fought over by Japan in World War II. Apparently, strategic value is measured in a sunburn and a lack of fresh water. Resupplying Wake isn't easy. Not because of the distance, well, that too, but mostly because it can't host a natural harbor. The reef is too shallow. Ships can't dock without leaving a part of their hull behind as a souvenir, so just like Nauru, everything has to anchor offshore and be ferried in. Think of it as an aquatic DoorDash, slow, wobbly, and 100% weather dependent. There is a 9,800-foot runway, courtesy of the US military. Great if you're an emergency jet, terrible if you're a crate of canned beans. Flying freight that far costs more than the cargo's worth, even for the United States, so Washington's not exactly lining up to build a harbor there. It's not worth the billions. Nauru doesn't have that luxury. It has to make do with what it's got, ocean freakouts and all. And the waves? They're not gentle. Anything built on coral has the same durability as a sandcastle at high tide. One strong swell, and your investment is floating away to Tasmania. Which is a problem, because the northwestern Pacific cranks out about 26 tropical cyclones every year. 26! That's like nature hosting a demolition derby and inviting everyone. Property owners in Florida pay between $4,000 and $6,000 a year in hurricane insurance alone. And that's Florida, a place with infrastructure, money, and Disney. Though, to be fair, Florida Man keeps things statistically interesting, but those premiums are higher than the entire GDP per capita of the Solomon Islands, Kiribati, and Vanuatu. The Marshall Islands barely clears the mark. So yeah, in Oceania, hurricanes aren't just weather. They're an economy-destroying subscription service that never lets you unsubscribe. Oh, and if you like these map dives, make sure to hit that subscribe button. I've charted enough ocean currents to qualify as maritime debris. Now add the high transport costs, especially when there's not a proper harbor. You can see why it's tough to task rebuilding here after disasters and why investment is minimal. Anyway, remember how the water supply depends on what's in the ground? In theory, a tropical storm or two should fix things. A little free desalination from the sky. But no. The same storms that refill the water table also turn it into a saltwater cocktail. And then there's the bright idea of building infrastructure on coral reefs. Ports, docks, resorts, all very impressive right up until you realize they destroy mangroves. Those same mangroves that act like nature's flood insurance. Coral reefs, too, are supposed to be barriers. Literally, giant ocean speed bumps that can reduce wave height by almost 90%. Now, imagine being an island like Nauru, bulldozing the reef to make a better harbor. Sure, ships can dock. Then the next storm turns the whole fleet into luxury housing for clownfish. People love to say climate change every time a hurricane shows up. It's practically Pavlovian at this point. Say storm and watch the talking points roll in. But scientists don't think global warming is creating more hurricanes. The oceans are just warmer, which means the ones that do form hit harder and last longer. Same amount, just meaner. And honestly, you don't need a hurricane to see what's going wrong out there. The danger's not in the natural disasters. It's in the slow, everyday grind. The kind that erodes livelihoods, then coastlines, and then hope. People always find new ways to make life harder, especially when it's someone else's life that pays the price. There are only 3 certainties in life: death, taxes, and rats following humans wherever they go. And that means cats, nature's pest control. On ships, they were the most popular crew members, mostly because sailors didn't have Netflix. Ship cats kept morale up and the rats down. Assassins, sure, but cute. But in Oceania, the story turns feral. Australia's cats are less ship mascots and more fuzzy terminators. They kill over 3 million mammals a day, plus millions of birds, reptiles, and invertebrates. Even frogs aren't safe. These aren't pests they're taking out either. They're the locals, the ones that actually belong there. It's like releasing lions into a petting zoo and then acting surprised when attendance drops. And if Australia's ecosystem has been wrecked, imagine what's happening to the smaller islands. Tiny patches of land, hyper-fragile, and about as resistant to ecological disaster as a paper umbrella in a cyclone. Take Fiji. The government considers feral cats the country's #1 threat to wildlife, which is why anyone bringing one in needs a permit and a microchip so authorities can track it. But it's already too late. Westerners brought cats generations ago. They're established. They're everywhere. And now their golden eyes are fixed on Yadwataba, the island home of the Fijian crested iguana. That island is still cat-free. For now. But the nearest cat colony, just 400 feet away. One short swim for catkind, one giant leap toward extinction. Turns out, when predators outbreed their prey, it doesn't end well. Rats arrived in Fiji around 3,500 years ago with the first settlers. Then, they immediately started terrorizing native frogs and birds like they owned the place. The Marshall Islands, same story, new species. Invasive black rats tore through Baikar Atoll and Jimo Islet. It was a seabird buffet, the same bird whose droppings once fertilized the entire ecosystem. The rats are gone now, but the damage remains. The birds were the gardeners, and without them, the system collapses. So, yeah, humanity's been exporting chaos for millennia, sometimes in the form of war, and sometimes in the form of adorable, fuzzy serial killers. But rats will eat anything. Seeds, seedlings, McDonald's chicken nuggets, nothing is safe. They even make it harder for the forests to regrow. They've been eradicated in parts of Tonga, like Leyte Island in Vava'u. A small win in a long, depressing war. So maybe Tonga and the Marshall Islands are finally breaking that third law of human existence: death, taxes, and rats. But the damage? Already done. The ecosystem's not so much recovering as slowly limping home. And some islands aren't that lucky. Because rats weren't the final boss, another invader showed up. Smaller, meaner, and somehow even worse. Starting in the mid to late 20th century, Oceania got a new settler. It created refugees everywhere it went. Insects, geckos, birds, gone. Wiped out by something that sounds like a punchline but behaves like a horror movie. Yellow, crazy ants. Each one spits formic acid like a pocket-sized fire-breathing dragon. One ant? No big deal. But there are billions and billions of them now, and they're all angry, and they're all spitting. Introduced accidentally from Asia, they've gone full zombie apocalypse across Oceania. They're chewing through everything they touch and multiplying like bad ideas. On Johnston Atoll alone, a single colony took over a quarter of the island. 1,000 queens in a plot 20 feet wide. Even the US Air Force couldn't bomb that many, though I'm sure someone suggested it. They cost Australia over $3 billion in 2012. And that's before even counting the damage to biodiversity. Australia can take the hit, the Solomon Islands, not so much. So now, yellow crazy ants sit proudly on the world's 100 worst invasive species list, a hall of fame nobody wanted to join. Their invasions turned islands like Palmyra, 1,000 miles south of Honolulu, into quarantined labs. Bought by the Nature Conservancy in 2000 for $30 million, it's now half runway, half experiment, where visitors disinfect gear before landing. The island even exorcised its rats, the original freeloaders. Midway Atoll followed a similar fate. Once a World War II battlefield, now a wildlife refuge. Peaceful, beautiful, and slightly haunted. Then there's Kure Atoll, the end of the line. Literally, after Kure, it's just ocean until Japan. Nobody's ever really lived there, except the unlucky. Shipwrecked sailors who learned the hard way that GPS was invented too late. Ships still ground there, as recently as 1998. Humanity, undefeated in the category of what's the worst that could happen. Washington eventually gave up and turned it into a wildlife refuge. Now only biologists visit, cleaning up ghost nets like underwater janitors for crimes they didn't commit. And it's not just America getting in on the Save Nature, Lose Money club. Fiji's got its Yadua Islands. Kiribati, they went big. The Phoenix Islands Protected Area, 157,000 square miles. That's 11% of their ocean economic zone. Imagine giving up a tenth of your paycheck for the planet. That's commitment. Or desperation. Hard to tell sometimes. Then came the copycats. Everyone wanted their own marine sanctuary. It's like a regional influencer trend. #blessed, #ocean edition. And of course, the French had to show up with a flex. In June of 2025, French Polynesia dropped the mic. A marine zone so huge it makes maps get anxiety. 420,000 square miles. The world's biggest marine refuge. Sacré bleu. Great news for fish. Not so great for people. Every new sanctuary means another place humans can't touch. 2 centuries of damage, and now we're putting up do not enter signs. The Pacific's turning into one giant apology letter. But this still isn't the biggest threat to the region. Not by a long shot. Ready for the real problem? It's the view, the ocean, the thing slowly trying to wipe them off the map. Sea levels are rising, fast enough to matter, slow enough for people to pretend they're not. Let's head to Tuvalu. Meet Takie Kitara. He's a local guy with a story that sounds poetic until you realize it's a warning. National Geographic reported that when he was born, his parents buried part of his umbilical cord under a coconut tree, a family marker, a sacred connection, an unwanted surprise for treasure hunters. When he was a kid, the ocean was 30 feet away. Now it's creeping closer, inch by inch. He says it's like the sea's getting hungry, and you know what? It is. Tuvalu sits just 10 feet above sea level. That's one big wave away from no longer exists. The government already knows it. They've basically sent out a preemptive evacuation notice. Building seawalls, like Venice's $7.5 billion MOST project? Impossible. Tuvalu's entire GDP in 2023 was $63 million. That's the kind of math where you don't even open up the calculator app. You just laugh and move on. MOST costs another $11.5 million a year just to run. Tuvalu couldn't afford the electricity bill, let alone the wall. And no, being the domain host for your favorite Twitch streamer isn't saving the economy. .tv isn't magic money. So, Tuvalu made a deal with Australia. 280 people a year can permanently relocate. Over 8,700 have already applied. That's 80% of the entire population. The rest are still hoping the ocean takes a day off. Give it a few decades, and Tuvalu will be gone. A country underwater, its people living in exile in Australia. Stateless, homeless, but hey, at least the internet will still think it exists. The .tv domain lives on. But Tuvalu's actually lucky. Australia was kind. Others weren't. The Pacific isn't sparsely populated because of rising seas or mutant ants. It's empty because people were taken, killed, erased. Entire cultures wiped away before the water even got a chance. But the biggest reason the Pacific is empty, it's not nature. It's history. When James Cook showed up, something terrible hitched a ride. Something invisible and unstoppable. Europeans brought dysentery, measles, and smallpox. All the hits, and none of the vaccines. Paradise turned quarantine. The Pacific Islands lit up with epidemics in the 18th and 19th centuries, like the Americas after Columbus, just with better scenery. And sure, that kind of disaster you can almost forgive. Medicine was basically medieval back then. Leeches, mercury, hope, but the next wave, not so forgivable. While Cook was sketching islands, another set of ships across the world was catching heat. Abolitionists were finally torching the transatlantic slave trade. By the late 1800s, it was over. Brazil outlawed slavery in 1888. Humanity high-fived itself. We did it! Slavery's over! Yeah, about that. While the West was polishing its halo, a brand new form of slavery was quietly thriving on the opposite side of the planet. You've probably never heard the word blackbirding. It was human trafficking, island style. It kicked off in 1863 with one Robert Towns, a man whose Wikipedia page should probably come with a warning label. He hauled 67 islanders to Queensland to work sugar and cotton plantations. The British Empire had banned slavery 30 years earlier, but banned is easy when your nearest cop is 10,000 miles away and travels by sailboat. From 1863 to 1904, about 60,000 Pacific Islanders were trafficked, stolen, tricked, or offered opportunities ahead, which is Victorian for kidnapped. They cut cane under the Australian sun, laid down railroads, and built wealth they'd never see. Sweat equity with no equity. It ended in 1906, but don't cheer yet. It wasn't morality that killed it. It was racism. Australia rolled out the White Australia policy, a whites-only sign the size of a continent. The fix? Deport nearly everyone. Only 2,500 were allowed to stay. The rest were shipped home to islands they hadn't seen in decades, like unwanted Amazon returns. Britain wasn't much better, and then came Japan, the new kid on the imperial block. Modern, militarized, and desperate to prove it could be just as ruthless as the old guard. The global message was clear. Cruelty wasn't dying out. It was leveling up. At first, it looked like maybe it wouldn't all go to hell. Japan took over Germany's old Pacific Islands after World War I and actually made things better. Doctors, vaccines, real medicine. The locals stopped dying from European germs for 5 minutes. Progress. But then came the fine print. Locals couldn't work in industry or shipping, not even fishing. Japan cornered the market on their own fish. It was like being banned from your own fridge, a move that feels suspiciously familiar. Just swap Japan for China and the Philippines and you've got a reboot. Only this version had fewer headlines and 0 options to fight back. Then the 1940s hit and everything broke again. War, occupation, horror. Japan rolled into Nauru, massacred 39 leprosy patients. Their war crimes apparently had no minimum age or moral standard. They deported 2/3 of the population. 1,200 people sent to Truk, now Micronesia. New location, same misery. Labor camps, starvation, disease. About 500 never came home. Blackbirding 2.0, now with uniforms. Japan held Nauru till the bitter end. Only surrendered when Hirohito realized, yeah, nukes are bad for business. But peace didn't fix it. The game just changed players. Same board, new flag. The great powers kept batting the Pacific around like a ball no one wanted to catch. The US jumped in next, annexing Hawaii through backroom deals. But that was the warm-up. The main event? The Marshall Islands. A place so remote, it's basically the universe's "you are here" arrow. 29 coral atolls north of New Zealand. People didn't even get there until the Bronze Age. Austronesians brought coconuts, bread taro, and chickens, the original carry-on luggage. Enough to live on, not enough to build empires. So, of course, empires came to them. Germany claimed the Marshalls. Japan took them. America took them from Japan. And then, because apparently that wasn't dramatic enough, America nuked them. 67 nuclear tests between 1946 and 1958, 23 at Bikini Atoll alone. Bikini got the grand finale, the biggest bomb the US ever built. Paradise turned to powder. And the irony, the name stuck. Bikini became a swimsuit, a marketing move so bizarre, it's like naming lingerie after Chernobyl. On March 1st, 1954, the shrimp went off. The cutest name ever for a 15-megaton tantrum, 1,000 times stronger than the bombs dropped on Japan. The blast turned coral into dust, fell back like snow. Pretty, until you remember its poison. The locals? Nobody asked them if they wanted front row seats to the end of paradise. In the late 60s, the island was safe. By 1978, never mind. The water was laced with strontium, and plutonium showed up in people's waste. Uncle Sam promised $561 million in damages. The check is still in the mail. And if that's not depressing enough, America nuked its own island, Johnston Atoll. Claimed in 1934, it was tropical and isolated. So naturally, the perfect place to blow things up. 16 nukes between 1958 and 1963, because why stop at one bad idea? Then Congress got creative. Let's try our chemical weapons too. Same island. Great plan. 400,000 chemical-laced rounds, 2,000 tons of nerve agent, the whole place razed. The only living thing there now? Ants. The yellow crazy kind. Coincidence? So far we've seen cursed islands, accidental science experiments, and world powers treating the Pacific like a sandbox full of hand grenades. You'd think people would steer clear, but not every island got the horror movie edit. Hawaii, now that one got the highlight reel. The Annexation Club didn't just want sugar. They wanted real estate with personality. Postcards that sell themselves. Beaches, volcanoes, 4 of them are active. Mauna Loa, Kilauea, Hualalai, and Loihi. That's the underwater one. That's basically a lava submarine. Scary? Not really. The locals knew better. Lava meant life, fertile soil, free fertilizer from the fiery pits of hell. It was perfect for taro, sweet potatoes, and, of course, pineapples, capitalism's favorite fruit. Add fish, chicken, pigs, and it's an instant paradise meal plan. Those volcanoes didn't just sprinkle nutrients around. They sculpted the islands, made them taller, stronger, more dramatic. Like Hawaii showed up to the Pacific and asked for the premium package. Height means water. Rivers, lakes, waterfalls that look photoshopped. Take Wailuku on the Big Island. Pearl Harbor gets all the fame, but Hawaii's loaded with ports. 10 of them, the lifeblood of the state's economy. Everything comes in by ship. Food, fuel, you name it. It's not cheap to live in paradise, but people here are doing fine. Turns out island living hits different when you're in the US tax system. Hawaii's always been full of people though. Long before James Cook came sailing in with his germs and curiosity. Around 300,000 lived here, maybe even up to 1.5 million. The real disaster wasn't isolation, it was contact. Western contact. Epidemics hit like an invisible invasion. And Hawaii wasn't alone. Tahiti, same story. Before Europeans showed up in the 1760s, the place had between 110 and 180,000 people. Why? Because those weren't just pretty islands. They were engineered by volcanoes, the shield kind. Look from above and they resemble giant Spartan shields from 300. This is Tahiti! But, with palm trees. The volcano died, but it left behind everything a civilization could ask for. Fertile soil that holds water, high cliffs, deep valleys, beaches with black sand that looked like they were imported from a luxury spa, and rivers, long ones. Papeano'o runs 20 miles across the island. Mount Orahena, the highest point in Tahiti, over 7,300 feet, tall enough for snow in the tropics. The snow melts, the runoff feeds 35 tributaries, and all those waterfalls you see in travel ads where influencers pretend they just stumbled into them. And it's not alone. Raiatea has the Wharoa River. Boats can actually sail up to it. A tropical river cruise, no alligators included. With that much fresh water, Tahiti could grow almost anything. Bananas, red fruit, citrus, nonos, a full produce aisle powered by geology. And the volcano didn't stop there. It built harbors, real ones, deep, safe, postcard perfect. Papeete became the big one. Bora Bora turned into the fancy one, and cruise ships love it. And yes, they're even bigger than cargo ships. So Tahiti, it's got the works. Soil, water, ports, tourists, trade, paradise with infrastructure. So Hawaii and Tahiti got lucky. They thrive because of the ground beneath them. Literal plot armor. The distance from the mainland, irrelevant. The volcanoes did the heavy lifting. They made the land high enough to laugh at rising sea levels. Laugh politely, of course. Meanwhile, the smaller atoll states, Tuvalu, Kiribati, Tokelau, they've got nothing but salt, sunlight, and a shipping schedule. Every basic need comes by boat. Water, food, hope. For humans, living on an island not named Hawaii or Tahiti is a tropical catch-22. Build too much, and you wreck the fragile ecosystem that keeps you alive. Build too little, and you stay stuck. A dot, a speck, a postcard, no one mails anymore. It's a balancing act. Life on a tightrope stretched over salt water. The Pacific isn't empty. It's exclusive, like a nightclub that only lets in islands with altitude. The ocean, the soil, the ecosystem, and the empires. They're the bouncers. They decide who gets to stay. Thanks for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you want to see more videos like this, then please consider subscribing and turn on notifications. Really does make a difference. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time on MatPack. The Sahara, a giant, sunburned sandbox the size of the US. Hardly anyone lives there. Why? Is it the heat, the lack of water, or just that camels got dibs first? Let's find out. First off, the Sahara isn't really empty. It's just picky about who stays. Take the Tuaregs, 2 million strong, scattered from Mali to Niger. These people have been out here since before Athens even dreamed up the Parthenon. Some historians even think they might be distant cousins of the ancient Egyptians, which means they were desert influencers before Instagram existed. They call themselves freemen, and they mean it. They fought back against everyone who even looked in their direction. Rome, the French, even the weather, and that's saying something when your backyard hits 122 degrees Fahrenheit. Then there are the Sahrawi, about 650,000 of them. Think of them as desert fusion, Arab conquerors mixed with the local barbers, all seasoned by centuries of wind, sand, and stubbornness. These people looked at endless dunes and said, yeah, looks good. So there are people out there. Just look at this map. But from space, the Sahara looks empty. As though someone hit delete on half a continent. The only people brave enough to be out here? Nomadic tribes. Their homes, traditional tents made from fabric and animal hair. Their livestock provides food and drink. And the method of travel? Camel caravans. Reliable in the blistering desert heat and essential for seeking out water sources. But more on them later. Let's take a wider look at the Sahara. The only green streak? It's over here. The Nile Valley. It's Egypt's cheat code. Predictable floods, endless farmland, and a history longer than your ex's list of red flags. Go west, and Libya tried to one-up nature with the Great Man-Made River. It was a $25 billion underground straw sucking water from ancient aquifers. Beyond that, it's the Great Beige Void. Between the Nile and the Sahel, population density drops. Across 3.6 million square miles, only 2.5 million people call this place home. The rest, and the world's largest solar panel, minus the electricity. But there is something peculiar about this dead zone. In 332 BC, Alexander the Great marched into Egypt and was crowned pharaoh. But conquering the known world wasn't enough. He decided to take a stroll across the Sahara. His destination? The Siwa Oasis, tucked deep in the Qattara Depression. A place so low, it's practically Earth's belly button, 62 feet below sea level. 200 springs bubble up through porous limestone and clay, quietly defying the laws of this place should not exist. Alexander was declared the son of the god Amun. Yeah, that's right. The desert looked at this sweaty Macedonian and called him Zeus Jr. You'd think he'd retire after that, but no, the man just kept walking. Today, around 25,000 people still live in Siwa, preserving ancient traditions amid dunes shaped like pyramids designed by Salvador Dali. But Siwa is just one oasis in the Sahara's secret network of watery loopholes. The biggest? Tafilalt, down in southern Morocco. It's the heavyweight champ of oases, nearly 30,000 square miles of palm groves lounging between cliffs of molten gold sand. It's less desert wasteland, more VIP section for dates and donkeys. Look at a population map and it's pretty obvious. Even a cactus could do the math. Water equals life. No water, no party. And everywhere else, Mars cosplay. Aside from the Nile and a few shy rivers hiding in the west, surface water is basically a rumor passed around at campfires. But 7,000 years ago, the Sahara was straight up green. A full-on tropical vibe. Hippos, cattle, people splashing around like it was some Bronze Age beach resort. Ancient rock art proves it. The world's oldest vacation selfies. Then came the great ghosting. The rains left, the rivers vanished, and the Sahara went full minimalist. It's all part of a 240,000-year climate cycle that swings between Eden and, good luck surviving past noon. Every 20,000 years, Earth wobbles on its axis. It's enough to throw the monsoons off course and turns paradise into a blow dryer. The planet's version of mood swings. We're deep in the Sahara's dry phase, the planet's built-in dehydrate setting. The monsoons packed up ages ago and moved south, leaving North Africa on hold. Rain here is about as predictable as your phone battery after an update. Officially, the Sahara gets less than 3 inches of rain a year, but that's the average. A third of it gets just 0.4 inches. Another 17%, barely 0.2 inches. That's the kind of dry that exfoliates your soul. Meanwhile, Phoenix, Arizona gets to brag about something, at last. Sure, it's hot enough to deep fry an egg on your driveway and your sanity on the walk to your car, but at least Phoenix has rivers. Real ones. The Colorado, the Salt, the Verde, a whole smorgasbord of hydration. They've got lawns, swimming pools, Zillow listings. The Sahara? Just mirages and regret. But beneath all that sand, ancient water trapped when this place was lush. Take a look at this map. Giant underground aquifers. The biggest, the Nubian sandstone aquifer system, sprawls across 1 million square miles, enough to keep the taps running for centuries. Except it's fossil water. Once you drink it, it's gone. No refills. Rain doesn't come here anymore. Libya's great man-made river lives off this ancient stash, slurping the remains of a wetter world. When it dries up,
so does the fantasy of a green Sahara. And if you like these map dives, make sure to hit that subscribe button. My ambition's evaporating faster than the groundwater. Anyway, even the oases, those tiny, stubborn green miracles, are dying slow deaths. The desert's gradually expanding every year in hotspot zones, swallowing the Sahel one grain at a time. At Timbuktu, the Niger River just ghosted the place, isolating the city from a reliable river source. Now the Sahel's crumbling into dust, and everyone left is watching the horizon creep closer. A slow-motion avalanche of sand whispering, soon. Siwa, Tafilalt, they're candles in a hurricane. Bright, beautiful, and doomed. No water means no people, no cities, and no tomorrow. The lights are still on, but the desert's already reaching for the switch. And yet, in the Western imagination, Timbuktu still sounds like a bedtime story for geography nerds. Well, I'm not talking about you. In one British poll, a third of people didn't even think it existed. Figures. The Sahara's always been the world's biggest catfish. But for now, Timbuktu is real, and its fairy tale rep comes from salt. The city didn't just rise because of it, it thrived on it. The Sahara hides more than 20 salt lakes and mines in the Tagaza and Taudeni, ancient money pits where men literally mined white gold. Timbuktu sat dead center, shipping salt north to the Mediterranean and south into the savannah. Back then, salt wasn't just seasoning, it was life insurance. No fridges, no ice, just sodium or starvation. Eat your food unsalted? You weren't rustic, you were barbaric. Civilization quite literally was built on seasoning. Salt Bay would have been in his element. But just like Salt Bay's career, the Sahara's Salt Act went too far. All sizzle, no survival. Too little water, too much salt, Earth's worst skincare routine. Rome supposedly salted the Earth after destroying Carthage. The Sahara, it did it to itself. When the climate flipped, the region's lakes vanished almost overnight, geologically speaking, leaving behind a crunchy crust of minerals. Fantastic for ancient traders, but awful if you were hoping to plant, well, anything. Even now, the soil's still marinating in salt. A few scraggly grasses poke through, plus the occasional palm tree, and then there's the desert watermelon. It's toxic enough, the FDA straight up banned it, and the US Army warns soldiers against eating it. And as if salt and poison melons weren't enough, the Sahara's got bacteria that hoard water like doomsday preppers. They trap every drop underground to protect themselves. A microscopic conspiracy to keep the desert dry. Life exists here, sure, but it's the kind of life that makes sure nothing else does. Sift away the dunes and you'll find what's really beneath. Yermasols, the desert's favorite dirt. They're the most common soil here, and they have a unique trait. Quirky, not like the other soils, they're thin, like influencer skinny. Beneath that barely there layer, gravel and pebbles. It's like the earth gave up halfway through making topsoil. If you're dreaming of farming here, forget it. Crops don't grow in gravel. About the best you'll get is a toxic watermelon and a sunburn. And even if you somehow could grow something, you'd have to deal with seasons. Except the Sahara doesn't care about the whole spring, summer, fall thing. Its seasons are just levels of chaos, from gentle exfoliation to sandblaster set to annihilate. In West Africa, from December to April, you get the harmattan. Locals call it the doctor wind, probably because it keeps doctors busy. It's dry and slightly cooler, but it also delivers bonus prizes, like parasites and tuberculosis-causing microbes. The humidity drops below 5%, which is great if you're beef jerky, not so much if you're human. Meanwhile, over in East Africa and the Levant, they get the Khamsin, the Sahara's hairdryer mode. 50 days of wind from March to May, blasting at up to 87 miles an hour. The mercury hits over 104 degrees Fahrenheit. That's not weather. That's nature's way of saying, you shouldn't live here. And these winds don't just melt people, they ruin dessert, literally. Chocolate prices spike every time the harmattan goes beast mode. The 2025 season was the driest in 6 years. Cocoa farmers in Ghana and the Ivory Coast watching their crops crisp up like a Scotsman in the Sahara. The result was the lowest cocoa yield in 21 years. So when you shell out $12 for a Valentine's box of chocolates, remember that's not inflation.
That's the Sahara blowing hot dust on your romance. Every year, the Sahara's winds do their worst. Not content to just roast crops, they go full mob boss and bury them alive. Plants can't photosynthesize when they're wrapped in nature's sandpaper. The wind even erodes the soil. No surprise, desert people gave up and traded salt, gold, and ivory instead. You'd ditch farming too if your fields kept blowing into the next time zone. But the wind doesn't stop at crops. It's civilization's archenemy. Sand here doesn't just sting, it schemes. It scours skin, shreds buildings, and eats power lines. Engines choke, filters clog, and machinery sounds like it's gargling gravel. Infrastructure doesn't age here. It erodes. The Trans-Sahara Highway, the world's longest construction project, started in the 1970s, and it's still not done. Parts are still unpaved. The price tag so far, $175 million in Niger alone, the world's priciest dirt road. And yet, beneath all that dust lies treasure. The Sahara's ancient green past left more than hippo fossils. It left a buried fortune. Oil, gas, uranium, phosphate. Algeria alone sits on 2% of the world's natural gas. Egypt and Libya are floating on trillions of cubic feet more. Algeria's uranium stash, about 26,000 tons. Morocco's phosphates, enough to feed half the planet, literally through fertilizer. The Sahara's not barren. It's just stockpiling like it knows something we don't. Why isn't it rich then? Simple. You can't dig without water. Oil drilling, uranium refining, gas extraction, they all need it, and here water isn't a resource. It's a religious experience. Using it to mine energy would be like draining your last oasis to charge your iPhone. Try pitching that to someone whose village just disappeared under a migrating dune. And even if industry somehow takes off, it'll chew up what's left of the land. Pumping, drilling, mining, all just different ways of taking a sledgehammer to soil that's already on life support. It'd poison the few water pockets still hanging on. Let's be honest, the Sahara doesn't need help getting drier, but we keep showing up with shovels anyway. Then come the man-made messes. What do you think of when you hear Libya? Well, things aren't as chaotic as the civil wars of the 2010s, but calling it stable is definitely glass half full. The UN-backed Government of National Unity mostly exists on letterhead. Elections promised for 2021, still a mirage. Rival militias keep circling like vultures at an all-you-can-eat buffet of bad decisions. It's so fragile that history's dark echo has returned. The trans-Saharan slave trade. Supposedly ended last century, but now it's back through Libya's smuggling routes, where traffickers move people instead of salt. So sure, the desert holds riches, oil, gas, minerals, human trafficking, but who's gonna invest billions in a place where governments evaporate faster than sweat? No company wants to bet on infrastructure that could be buried by politics before the sand even gets a chance. Zoom out, and it's the same story across the map. The borders slicing through the Sahara are colonial ghosts. They were drawn by Europeans who, by 1914, owned 90% of Africa, after having just 10% in 1870. Lines made in Europe forced on Africa. The land never listened. And now, it's reminding everyone who's really in charge. The wind, the heat, and time itself. When the old empires finally finished straight up murdering each other, they were too broke to keep their colonies. But handing them back was less graceful exit and more, good luck with that. The colonizers had drawn borders through cultures they barely understood. Trade routes and communities were sliced up. The result? A map held together with bad guesses and arrogance. Those lines are still haunting everyone today. The borders may be arbitrary, but the countries they carved up are painfully real. Political Frankensteins stitched together. Most are run by strongmen who rose from the aftershocks of the Arab Spring, each one promising stability while holding a match over a barrel of gasoline. The Sahel War now stretches across a large swath of Africa. It's the desert's version of a group project where everyone's failing. When French forces pulled out of Mali in 2022, the power vacuum didn't just sit there. Military regimes poured in. Now, figures like Abdurrahman Chiani run the show. turning the region into a patchwork of juntas. Not exactly where investors line up with PowerPoints and open checkbooks. You can't pitch stability when the guy signing your permit shows up in sunglasses and a tank. And colonialism didn't just wreck politics, it wrecked the dirt, literally. Europe forced locals to ditch sustainable crops for cash ones like cotton. It stripped the soil faster than the colonizers stripped the land. By the time independence rolled around, the ground was cooked. All the nutrients gone, slow cooked by the sun until even the dirt tapped out. So, is the Sahara doomed? Well, not quite. But don't expect a Disney ending. Take Doha, Qatar, a sci-fi mirage that actually worked. It hit an average of 106 degrees Fahrenheit last year, and it's doing okay. It's powered by sheer stubbornness and desalination plants. Since 1954, Doha's been turning seawater into tap water so efficiently that 99.9% of its supply comes from the Gulf. The other 0.01%? Aquifers. Backup for when Poseidon rage quits. It's an engineering miracle, one the Sahara can't even dream of. You can't desalinate what you don't have. Like access to a water reserve and a few billion tucked behind a dune. Qatar's secret weapon isn't luck. It's liquid gold and explosive personality. The country's sitting on over 25 billion barrels of oil and 843 trillion cubic feet of natural gas, about 11% of the planet's stash. And as of February of 2024, Qatar Energy claims it's found even more, another 240 trillion cubic feet in the North Field. What does that mean? Money. Mountains of it. Enough to make Qatar the world's 5th richest country per capita. That's buy another soccer team just to bench it rich. The process isn't cheap. About $5 to $10 per 1,000 gallons. But when your GDP could drown a small nation, you don't sweat the bill. Now picture Libya trying that trick. Desalination on Qatar's scale? Not a chance. And Libya's one of the richer nations in the Sahara. Sudan, Mauritania, Senegal, they're not even in the race. Unless some miracle investor shows up with deep pockets and zero fear of coups, desalination's staying on the wish list, right next to democratic government. Sure, Libya's great man-made river does it, but you try maintaining it through sandstorms and shifting dunes. And roads. Forget it. And then there's politics, the Sahara's most persistent drought. Moving anything across these borders means negotiating with governments that can barely negotiate with themselves. In theory, they could fund projects together using oil and gas money. In practice, that requires peace, stability, and a total absence of coups. 3 things the Sahara's allergic to. Niger alone has had 5 since independence in 1960. There is one country in the Sahara you won't find on most maps, the Sahrawi Arab Democratic Republic, aka the SADR. It's actually a government that almost no one recognizes. It claims Laayoune as its capital, but Morocco controls both the city and about 80% of the territory. To lock that down, Morocco built a 1,400-mile sand wall cheerily called the Free Zone. The SADR's de facto capital, Rabuni, a refugee camp with a flag. This stalemate's been dragging on since the 1970s, making long-term investment sound like the setup to a cruel joke. Desalination plants? Shipping routes? Please. No one bets billions on land where even the borders can't stay put. So what is the Sahara's biggest export? It's not oil, not gas, not even water. It's dust. Every summer, the Saharan air layer kicks up 180 million tons of the stuff and yeets it across the Atlantic. It drifts over New York, sprinkles the Caribbean, and settles in Cancun, just in time to photobomb someone's honeymoon. But it's also Florida's BFF. Remember the hurricane factory that was the 2005 Atlantic season? 2006 was supposed to be the sequel. 16 named storms, 10 hurricanes, 6 majors. Instead, the Sahara hit send dust, and the ocean said, I'm out. Only 5 hurricanes showed up, and just 2 made varsity. That dry air choked the storm system, the desert's idea of weather management. And the dust doesn't just kill storms, it feeds jungles. Each year, about 27.7 million tons of Sahara dust fall on the Amazon basin, loaded with phosphorus, rainforest vitamins. It's nature's weirdest supply chain, one of the driest places on Earth, keeping one of the wettest alive. Nature's strangest long-distance relationship. 15,000 years from now, when the Sahara finally stops sneezing dust across the planet, things could get messy. Expect more hurricanes gunning for Florida and fewer nutrients landing in the Amazon. A terrible trade. More chaos for everyone, but that's a tomorrow problem. Today, the countries bordering the desert, the Sahel nations, are just trying not to get buried by sand. And that's where the Great Green Wall comes in. Africa's grand plan to fight sand with leaves. Launched in 2007, it's a botanical Hail Mary. 5,000 miles of trees meant to restore 247 million acres of dead land, trap millions of tons of CO2, and create 10 million jobs by 2030. Basically, the planet's biggest gardening project. Even Eritrea signed on, probably because its president doesn't want to wake up one day with beachfront property made entirely of dust. It's bold, it's brilliant, and it's behind schedule. As of last year, only about 30% of the target areas were restored. Coordination across a dozen countries has been about as smooth as a camel ballet in a sandstorm. Critics call it green neocolonialism, especially after Emmanuel Macron showed up in 2021 with a checkbook and a guilty conscience. Nothing says, "Sorry for colonizing you," like offering to plant a few trees. And really, not everyone wants the same hand that held the whip, now handing out watering cans. Still, there are bright spots. Senegal's chunk of the wall actually works, proof that when locals take charge, the desert backs off. More nations are following suit. When your livelihood's being buried alive, you plant trees first and count profits later. But that's the Sahara, always hungry, always moving. A beast that demands tribute just to let you exist. When an entire continent has to grow a forest the size of Australia just to stay livable, you realize survival here isn't just a lifestyle, it's a job, with no breaks, no benefits, and the boss is the wind. Thanks for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you want to see more videos like this, then please consider subscribing and turn on notifications. It really does make a difference. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time on MatPack. Russia is so big that it has 11 time zones. When the sun rises in Moscow, it's setting in Vladivostok. Even so, it never became an empire on which the sun never sets, no matter how hard it tried. Why? Because size isn't everything. Sometimes being big actually brings trouble. Vladimir Putin once said that the fall of the Soviet Union was the greatest geopolitical catastrophe of the 20th century. For the wider global community, this probably raised a few chuckles when they heard it, but it was no laughing matter for the people closer to Russia. They know better than anyone that Russia wants to be big. No, it needs to be big. Moscow sees it as a matter of survival. Russia's vast size isn't an accident. The country expanded rapidly between the 16th and 19th centuries. This didn't start as an imperial project, it was more of an act of desperation, a reaction to the ghosts of the past. The Mongols and the Tatars once ruled Russia with an iron fist. Russians remembered these medieval invasions and tried to acquire natural borders to prevent them from happening again. Unfortunately, easily defensible borders are very hard to come by in this part of the world. Sure, there's the Ural Mountains, which were annexed by 1574, but they didn't help at all in the west. While the Tsardom of Russia was colonizing the Urals, it was also involved in the Livonian War, and that was a disaster. Russia fought for its life against European powers like Sweden, Denmark, and the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, while another army of Ottomans and Tatars from Crimea made it all the way to Moscow and started a fire. The city survived, but a generation later, the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth said, "My turn." It invaded Russia, and since there was little to stop it, it occupied Moscow too. If you're wondering why Putin said something so absurd, you're starting to get a glimpse into the reasons why. Superpowers tend to be blessed by geography. Britain might be a small island, but it was the center of a world empire in large part because it was hard to invade. After all, it's an island, and it had the Royal Navy on patrol. The United States went from a British colony to a superpower in large part because it has the benefit of being separated from other great powers by 2 oceans. Russia doesn't have much at all to defend it. Take out a map of Europe, and you might notice something that will tell you why Putin's invasion of Ukraine is a complete failure. Most of the continent of Europe is a vast, level plain that stretches from the Pyrenees to the Urals. The further east you go, the wider the plain gets. At the Urals, the plain stretches for over 1,200 miles, 1,931 kilometers, from the Arctic Ocean to the Caspian Sea. It's a place that's good for the movement of huge armies and pretty much impossible to defend. Russia knows that all too well. For centuries, it tried to reverse that situation, and by the Cold War, it had to a large extent. The Soviet Union stretched all the way to Berlin, far to the west in the European plain, where it was a lot narrower. It could concentrate numerically superior forces there, and if it came down to a war, overwhelm its enemies. NATO countries feared this prospect for decades. It influenced everything the alliance did. Western tanks were designed to have the range and durability to destroy more than one Soviet tank. Even stealth technology was born in large part because of this geographical situation. The F-22 Raptor started its life in the 1980s. To ensure that the United States would not lose an advantage in the skies over Europe, it absolutely could not afford to, lest the Soviet tank columns come in wave after unstoppable wave. But then, the Berlin Wall fell, and in the space of just 2 years, those gains that had taken centuries and countless lives for Russia to achieve were all gone. Russia retreated far back to the east, where the plain was vast and wide again. Such was the end of Putin's historical Russia, even though historically, Russia had to go to war to get all of this territory. So, Putin went to war again for it, just with a lot less success than the Tsars and Soviet dictators who preceded him. In June of 2025, Russian casualties in what was supposed to be a brief special military operation hit the 1 million mark. What has Putin gotten for such a price? Between the start of the invasion and July 9th of 2025, Russia has seen a net gain of almost 28,000 square miles, 72,500 square kilometers, about half the size of the US state of New York. That week, it only gained an additional 18 square miles, 47 square kilometers. Russia controls about 20% of Ukraine, the eastern 20%, where the European plain is wider and harder to defend. But it gets worse. Before the war, Russia's border with NATO was 754 miles, 1,213 kilometers. Putin wanted to reduce that vulnerability by forcing Ukraine back into Moscow's orbit. That would bring Russia further west along the European plain. But alas, his plan only wound up bringing Finland into the alliance and increasing the total border he has to defend by an additional 830 miles, 1,300 kilometers. That means more money spent on the armed forces so they can defend this long stretch of open territory. Even when the war is over, the gains in Ukraine simply won't be significant enough to undo the deterioration in Russia's geographic position thanks to a strengthened NATO. But Putin, and probably whatever dictator comes after him, felt a strong historical compulsion. As long as Russia follows the tradition of Peter the Great and aspires to superpower status, it needs more easily defensible borders, and we haven't gotten into the strongest reason why yet. Look at a map of Russia and divide it through the Urals. Over 3/4 of Russia's territory is east of that line, but 80% of the population is to the west of it. The most vulnerable areas of Russia also have by far the most value. Any disruption to this part of the country would bring devastating consequences. Unfortunately for Moscow, its territory west of the Urals is just as vulnerable now as it was in the time of the Mongols and Tatars. Russia might have 11 time zones, but not all of them are created equal. Most of the things that matter are right here. The cities of Moscow and St. Petersburg alone have a combined 17 million people, about 12% of Russia's population. Most of Russia's problems today are in the west, but expanding so far east of the Urals brought problems too. Russia was originally lured there when it realized there was something valuable to go around. But everything has a price. It gets really cold in Siberia. The average daily high temperature for the year is 35.6 degrees Fahrenheit, 2 degrees Celsius. The winters are especially harsh. In January, the average daily high doesn't even get into positive territory on the thermometer. Little wonder why the population density out here is only about 3 people to a square kilometer. So why did Russia even bother expanding here? Such cold temperatures mean animals with thick furs, like Arctic foxes and even tigers. Russian traders soon realized that the fur from these animals could be sold at an enormous profit in Europe. The fur industry back then was what the energy industry is for Russia today, the economic engine that provided the wealth for its war machine and the luxury of its rulers. So Russian traders poured over the Urals and armies soon followed. The tribes in the region had little chance against Russian gunpowder, so they were forced into a coercive arrangement. Russian trading posts were set up in Siberia. The locals would then come to pay regular fur tributes. Otherwise, they had little connection with Moscow, the wider Russian society, or each other. That's still the case. Take out another map of Russia and look at its network of roads. You'll notice something peculiar. Russia's European heartland west of the Urals is well connected. There's a sprawling network centered on Moscow. The situation is a lot different in the east. With few exceptions, the Siberian districts are isolated from each other. The major road network is the Trans-Siberian Highway. Conveniently, this road helps Moscow to maintain its control of Siberia, but control isn't the same as development. The Trans-Siberian Highway is the world's third longest road. It stretches 6,800 miles, nearly 11,000 kilometers from St. Petersburg to Vladivostok. But if you think that traveling along it is as simple as taking a ride along I-95 on the east coast of the United States, you better think again. Sure, the entire highway is paved with asphalt and concrete, but that doesn't mean all parts are in the same condition. As you might expect, the highway is usually in good shape in Russia's European heartland. Move east of the Urals, though, and your trip will get a lot more challenging, especially during a certain time of year. And it's not the one you think. If you have good heating for the interior of your car, the Siberian winter probably won't be as much of a challenge as you feared. At least, not on this road. But if you're traveling in the summer, look out. Siberian summers are kind of normal, with temperatures reaching average highs of about 75 degrees Fahrenheit, 23.8 Celsius in July. But there's a catch. It can get rainy during the summer months. Just over 4 pints, 2 liters of water fall on 11 square feet, 1 square meter per day on average. It's slightly more in August. That might not sound like a lot. New York City actually gets significantly more rain in the summer. It's just that the United States can take much better care of its infrastructure. The road is often badly paved east of the Urals, so when the rains come, a lot of it becomes quagmire. The Russian authorities simply don't have the resources to keep it in the condition it needs to be kept in. The sheer distances involved are just too much to handle. It doesn't help that parts of it can go through challenging terrain like forests or tundra. And don't expect to find many accommodations along your journey. Remember, there's only an average of 3 people per square kilometer in Siberia. Opening an inn along this route is something only the most daring entrepreneurs would probably try. You'll more likely be sleeping in your car or going camping, where you can expect to find plenty of mosquitoes to keep you company in those fleeting times of warmth out here. It might not surprise you to hear that travel guides advise would-be drivers to prepare for the worst and to never drive along the Trans-Siberian Highway alone. If your car suffers from mechanical problems or there's some other kind of emergency, you could be many miles indeed from help. Drivers always need to remember the scales involved out here. The distance from Irkutsk to Khabarovsk, 2 of the larger cities along just the eastern part of the highway, is still greater than the distance between New York and Dallas, Texas. And remember, the Trans-Siberian Highway is the best road out here. The local roads are in much worse condition. They're usually not paved, and the paved ones are often full of potholes. The lack of infrastructure means that some towns in Siberia are inaccessible for most of the year. 10% of the Russian population gets completely cut off from the rest of the country for days or even weeks. Take Chersky in the Sakha Republic. Winter temperatures here can go as low as minus 58 degrees Fahrenheit, 50 below Celsius. It's nowhere near the Trans-Siberian Highway, so it's isolated, buried under ice and snow for 8 months. That's sort of by design. The place was founded in 1931 as part of Stalin's network of gulags. At its peak, the town had a population of about 12,000, but understandably, the vast majority left after the Soviet Union collapsed. Nearly 2,900 remained by the time of the 2010 Russian census. Chersky is a fairly typical case when it comes to Siberian towns, especially if they're north of the Arctic Circle. These towns are often situated in tundra. Trucks can bring in supplies when the rivers freeze, but you won't be surprised to hear that these journeys can be long and dangerous. The road trip, if you can call it that, from Yakutsk, the region's largest city, to Chersky is just under 1,200 miles, 1,900 kilometers, and takes a week. Even a flight by turboprop takes 4.5 hours. Even all these centuries later, Russia still hasn't developed the necessary infrastructure to connect Siberia to the Russian heartland. And that's partly by design. It helps when Moscow finds a need to exploit the locals for its ambitions. The people in Siberia have been the first to die in Ukraine, so that the people in Russia's major heartland cities need not. But this treatment of the locals is a double-edged sword. Paying so little attention to the people and infrastructure out here means that the Russian economy is stuck in second gear. Siberia brings up a fantastic paradox for life in modern Russia. How is one of the world's most fantastically rich places so poor? The numbers don't lie. Russia is the world's most resource-rich country. Investors value its natural resources at a whopping $75 trillion. Even the United States only comes in at a distant second with $45 trillion worth of natural resources. Russia has the world's largest proven natural gas reserves at 1.32 quadrillion cubic feet in 2020 alone, good for 20% of the global total. It has about 80 billion barrels of proven oil reserves, making it the world's 8th largest in that category. But it has much more to offer than that. Its natural resources are extraordinarily diverse. Russia is like a phrase out of Greek myth. It is literally rich in gold. It produced 322 tons in 2023, second behind China, and consumed only 71 of them. There's plenty to go with the gold, too. The Russian Far East alone has silver, timber, iron ore, lead, and zinc. It also has over 543 million acres, 220 million hectares of farmland. That's important because aside from energy, agricultural products are Russia's second biggest export. And if you think Russia isn't blessed with the materials needed for the modern digital economy, think again. The US Geological Survey estimates that Russia has 3.8 million metric tons of rare earth metals. Its reserves are the world's 5th largest. Russia's Natural Resources Ministry says the stockpile is much bigger than that, 28.7 million tons for whatever that's worth. We wouldn't blame you if you didn't think it was worth much. Either way, the metals aren't of one type, but come in a wide variety. There's lithium for batteries, gallium for semiconductors, and beryllium for aircraft, spacecraft, and even potential nuclear fusion reactors, just to name a few. Yakutia alone has at least 1.7 million tons of rare earth material at its Tomtor deposit. But despite this fantastic wealth, Russia's economy is only the world's 11th largest. That sounds big, but with such resources to call on, why isn't it bigger? The picture gets even bleaker when you look at the people. The World Bank says that its GDP per capita was almost $15,000 in 2024. That's smaller than the likes of Costa Rica, by the way. The Siberian districts, which have all of this wealth, are emptying out, too. Millions of people have fled since 1991, going to places like Moscow to look for better opportunities. A third of the population in the Russian Far East has disappeared since then. Only about 5 million remain. That wouldn't be happening if they could benefit from this wealth, but they aren't. Putin has grand plans to fix that. He wants Russia to become one of the world's top 5 rare earth producers and snatch 12% of the international market share by 2030, which seems unlikely. Remember the road network there? There probably wouldn't be a lot of activity. The infrastructure simply isn't there. As you might have figured out by now, the roads are one of the most frequent items of complaint by locals in Russia. There's a good reason for those complaints. Russia's roads can be downright dangerous. In 2023, 14,700 people died in traffic accidents. That sounds like a lot less than the nearly 41,000 deaths in the United States that year, but when you consider that there are 243 million licensed drivers in the US and only 72.5 million in Russia, the accidents stand out a lot more. Once again, the numbers don't lie. About 0.01% of American drivers died in accidents in 2023, twice as many of Russia's drivers did. Goldman Sachs once ranked Russia's road network 130th out of 142 in the world. That was a few years ago, but since the Russian government spends 40% of its budget on the military these days, the situation probably hasn't changed much. If anything, it's gotten worse, and this time at least, it isn't just limited to Siberia. Siberia might have the biggest problem, but roads in the heartland are frequently congested because of bad conditions. Even the route between Moscow and St. Petersburg isn't equipped to handle traffic from heavy trucks. So it raises another paradox. How is Russia supposed to become a rare earth powerhouse if it can't ship the people, equipment, and goods around its vast interior? Before the war, the Russian Ministry of Transport estimated that Russia lost between 7 and 9% of its GDP every year due to poor roads. Why doesn't Russia try everything it can to improve the roads, then? Well, it's not so simple. The harsh climate obviously works heavily against such efforts. Then there's the corruption. Corruption has always been one of the major reasons why Russia has never been as successful as its dictators wanted it to be. It's no different now. Improvements to a country's infrastructure take a lot of investment, and with so much money sloshing around, don't be surprised to hear that corrupt officials are going after it. The Ruski Bridge, once the world's longest suspension bridge, measures in at around 3,900 feet, almost 1,200 meters, and connects Vladivostok to Ruski Island. It was finished in 2012, and then Prime Minister Medvedev hailed it as a symbol of Russian engineering. There's just one problem. It's sort of Russia's version of a bridge to nowhere. Ruski Island only has 5,000 inhabitants, and the bridge cost $1.1 billion to build. This is just one example. Monitors estimate that 70% of investments in road projects are lost because of corruption. The local contractors who are supposed to work on the roads pay politicians to get their jobs. The money that's left over is then used to build the road. The locals then get to complain about the obstacle course of potholes they need to navigate. Like many taxi drivers across the world, Russian cabbies like to make small talk with their foreign passengers, but they don't talk about the weather. Or even what you think of Moscow. Instead, they ask, "What do you think about our Russian roads?" And no matter what answer the passenger gives, they'll be met with the same response. Because in Russia, complaining about the roads is practically a national pastime. Over 90% of the population agrees. The roads are awful. Russia's infrastructure investments have been inadequate and misplaced, but even if things were above board and completely done, it would still have an almost unsolvable problem. The country is just too big. Even the United States has a lot of problems maintaining its infrastructure. That's in large part because there's so much to maintain. It's the world's third largest country with 4 different time zones in its continental mass. But Russia is almost twice as big, with far more formidable terrain. It gets colder, and shipping things over such vast distances in harsh locales will by its nature be risky. Imagine trying to insure something like a rare earth deposit that took millions to get out of the ground, only knowing that it will need to travel through the harsh Siberian winter for thousands of miles. Even if Russia's rail and road networks were perfectly maintained and world-class, products would still have to cross all of this space. It's sort of the same problem that China once faced. The Silk Road was the center of world trade, stretching all the way to Western Europe. But even if you cut out all the middlemen and the bandits along the way, as the Mongols sort of once did, the route was just too long and harrowing to travel on. Economic growth was always limited by that geographical space. That's why, as soon as alternatives opened, the sea routes that Europeans started to discover in the late 15th century, the Silk Road quickly went by the wayside. Xi Jinping is desperately trying to revive it, but he's having about as much success as his buddy to the north. This story brings up another curious paradox. In theory, Russia shouldn't need to be limited by its treacherous overland routes. It has almost 24,000 miles, 38,600 kilometers of coastline, good for 5th in the world. But not all coastline is created equal. Russia isn't taking advantage of its coastline. When it comes to container port traffic, the World Bank says that China is ranked first with almost 269 million 20-foot, 6-meter equivalent units in 2022, a term that refers to a standard-sized shipping container. The United States ranked a distant second with 62.2 million. Where was Russia? Not in the top 10. Try 36th. That's even lower than tiny countries like Belgium. Singapore, ranked third in the country, has ports that get almost 10 times the container traffic that Russia does. It turns out there's a reason for this, too. Russia's ports aren't all that good, and it's not necessarily because of incompetence or corruption. At least that can theoretically be fixed, but there's something else that can't. Take a look at where Russia's coastline actually is. The vast majority of it is along the country's north, and over half of Russia's territory is above the 60th degree north latitude. Russia's stretches account for over 53% of the total coastline of the Arctic Ocean. What's the constant companion you can expect to find up here? The answer is obvious. Almost all of Russia's ports are icy for large parts of the year. There's a way around this, icebreakers, and Russia has a lot of them. Its fleet counts 57 icebreaker ships, more than any other country. Canada comes in at a distant second with 18. 8 of Russia's icebreakers are nuclear-powered, which means they can stay at sea for months at a time, breaking ice and helping Russian commerce. The United States, which only has 5 icebreakers, has begun to see Russia's icebreaker fleet as a problem. The entire NATO alliance only has 47, so it's entered into a pact with NATO allies to ensure that Russia can't gain complete superiority in the Arctic. They envision building a combined fleet of 90 icebreakers. But there's a reason the United States has neglected its icebreaker fleet. It simply hasn't needed such expensive ships. Its ports don't freeze over for long. They're always open for business. Russia would swap places in a heartbeat if it could. Russia has only a few warm water ports. Right now, these include Sevastopol in occupied Crimea and Novorossiysk on the Black Sea. But they're not ideal. They sit behind the Bosphorus and Dardanelles that its historical rival Turkey controls. The rivalry played out again a few days after the invasion when the Turks announced they would not let Russian naval vessels pass through the straits. If worse came to worst, the Turks could block Russia's access to the Mediterranean at any time. Peter the Great and Russian dictators after him spent a lot of blood and treasure over generations of war against the Ottoman Turks to secure footholds on the Black Sea. And yet, Turkey still has the geographical advantage. So Russia expanded elsewhere to look for more warm water ports. There's Kaliningrad, but it has a problem too. Instead of being behind the Turkish choke points, this one's behind choke points that other old enemies, Denmark and Sweden, can easily control, especially now with America's help. Sweden is refortifying the island of Gotland, which is only 214 miles, 345 kilometers away from Kaliningrad. It's already being called NATO's aircraft carrier in the Baltic. And then, even if Russian ships were able to get through the choke points here unscathed, they would still need to go through the English Channel and all of NATO's naval assets there. In earlier times, they would have had to deal with the might of the Royal Navy, so Kaliningrad isn't a solution for Russia's Black Sea woes. Russia's geography provides a way out, though. Sort of. Surprisingly, the port of Murmansk usually doesn't freeze over in the winter despite its high northern latitude. That's thanks to the warm current of the jet stream coming out of the Gulf of America, formerly known as the Gulf of Mexico. But not so fast. Take a look at where Murmansk is. To get from Murmansk to the open ocean, Russian ships need to go through the GI-UK gap, the two straits between Greenland and Iceland and the United Kingdom. The Royal Navy has a lot of experience patrolling these waters in living memory. During the Cold War, it specialized in the area. It was even worse for Imperial Russia when the Royal Navy ruled the world's waves. Russia's lack of open ocean warm water ports in its European heartland gave it another reason to continue expanding east past the Urals, all the way to the Pacific and even into North America. What did it get for these efforts? First, consider the port of Petropavlovsk-Kamchatsky on the Kamchatka Peninsula. Surprisingly, it doesn't freeze over. Unfortunately for Russia, it's still not all that good. Kamchatka can't be connected to the Russian mainland by road or rail. The terrain is just too forbidding. So Russia continued looking throughout the vast Eurasian continent for a warm water port that wasn't behind potentially hostile checkpoints. Vladivostok was a major aim. Finally securing it from China in the 19th century was a major victory. Unfortunately for Russia, it's still not good enough. Back then, it used to freeze for 4 months in the year. It doesn't have the benefit of the Gulf Stream and is near the polar temperatures that freeze Siberia over between November and March. The climate is warmer now, so the port doesn't get as much ice these days, but there's another problem. To get from Vladivostok to the open ocean, Russian ships need to cross through checkpoints in the Sea of Japan. That's bad news for Moscow. Vladivostok wasn't satisfactory for Russia, so it tried to control Port Arthur, now the Lushunko district in Dalian, China. It didn't freeze over in the winter. Sure, it's still isolated from the open ocean, but better to go through the Yellow Sea and the Chinese coastline than the Sea of Japan, right? Japan didn't think so, which helped to lead to the Russo-Japanese War. Russia and Japan have more or less been at odds ever since. Russia wasn't able to hold on to Port Arthur. Japan took it in the war. The Soviet Union got it back after World War II, but then gave it to the new People's Republic of China in 1956. So all the adventure was still for naught. Peter the Great envisioned Russia as a great maritime power, but none of his successors have ever been able to live up to that vision. The Russian Tsars of the 19th century got so desperate for a warm water port that would be safe from the Royal Navy that they started to look for prospects in the Persian Gulf or even on the Indian Ocean. So the competition with Britain, known as the Great Game, began. Russia didn't win it. For all its gains, right up to the present day, Russia is still a landlocked country if its adversaries want it to be. There's no need to look too far back in time for an example of how dangerous this could be for Russia's security. The Nazis made rapid progress indeed when they invaded the Soviet Union on June 22, 1941. The United States agreed to supply the Soviets under the Lend-Lease Act shortly afterward, but there was a huge problem. How would the goods actually get there? Murmansk? Nazi U-boats would make that route difficult and dangerous. Plus, Hitler occupied Norway. The Black Sea route? Double no. Greece was under Axis occupation. Plus, the Nazis had taken Crimea and wouldn't lose it until 1944. Vladivostok, or some other area along the Russian Pacific coast? That would mean dealing with the Imperial Japanese Navy at a time when Tokyo was dominant in the region. There was only one choice. The ships would land at ports in the Persian Gulf and then move through the Persian Corridor in Iran. And even that took something out of a parody movie to achieve: a joint invasion by Britain and the Soviet Union. The government there was too sympathetic to the Axis powers before that. Fortunately, the invasion worked. The American supplies got to Russia after going halfway around the world, and the Nazis were finally thrown back. Russia could, in theory, build a strong navy to counter these geographical weaknesses, but there's a problem there. You might have expected that by now. On paper, Russia's navy is one of the strongest in the world, but go under the hood and you'll see the challenge it faces. All of Russia's big ships, its lone aircraft carrier, 4 cruisers, and 10 destroyers are over 30 years old. Even Russia's submarine fleet is aging. The newer ships that are coming into service tend to be lighter frigates or corvettes. They have less range and aren't as capable in combat. In other words, Russia's navy is becoming less able to secure its maritime trade and make up for its geographical weaknesses. And it's all because of another fact of geography that you're familiar with now. Peter the Great's desire to make Russia a great naval power didn't erase the problem of its wide-open borders, with potentially hostile states to both west and east. Having a world-class military is an expensive business, especially when it comes to a navy. That's why historically, most states have had to choose whether they will spend resources on being a land power or whether to be a naval power. Well, that's sort of a misstatement. Usually, geography makes the choice for them. As an island, Britain didn't need to spend as much money on its army. Investing in the navy was the way for it to defend itself. It was also a fantastically good way to make itself the world's dominant empire. For Russia, the opposite is true. With such indefensible borders, it needs to spend much more money on maintaining an army capable of covering so much ground. All of Russia's moments of crisis came on land, not at sea. For Moscow, sea power is a luxury, and one that's becoming increasingly unaffordable. So, is there any way out for Russia? Can it possibly find a way to get its fantastic resources to hungry world markets in a way that its foreign rivals can't interfere with? There might be. For Russia, global warming is a very, very good thing. In 2018, Russia and China signed a $9.5 billion investment agreement to develop infrastructure. It sounds standard, but there was something peculiar about it. The only specifically named priority in the Russian press release was the Northern Sea Route. This route, which you might also know of as the Northeast Passage, spans the distance between Murmansk and Vladivostok. It has a lot of advantages to it. Remember that ship that got stuck in the Suez Canal in 2021? It cost the world economy $400 million an hour. A well-developed Northern Sea Route would avoid all of that. Instead of voyaging around Eurasia through choke points like the Strait of Malacca and the Suez Canal, they could go around the Russian coast. There are many advantages to this. It would save a lot of time and money. A typical journey, say from Tokyo to Hamburg, takes 48 days along the Suez Canal route. The same journey on the Northern Sea Route would only take 35 days. People have hoped to save time through Arctic shipping routes since the 16th century, but now things are finally looking up, almost literally. In 2010, a total of 41,000 tons of cargo passed through the Northern Sea Route. By 2019, the number increased almost 7 times to 285,000. That's partially because of more icebreakers, but Moscow is hoping they'll be a rarer sight on the seas soon. The scientific models are converging, and they're predicting something that hasn't happened in 125,000 years. The Arctic Ocean could be ice-free in summertime by 2050. Bolder predictions say it could happen as early as the 2030s, and that could be great news for Russia. Sure, development along the Northern Sea Route has so far been more of an object of hype than something that's actually happened. China remains interested, but there's been little going on in the way of concrete projects. Russia's invasion of Ukraine set those development plans back. Even so, we can expect more concrete investments this century. There's just too much to gain, and Russia would be the biggest winner. Imagine ships all over the world stopping on Russia's coast to do business. But does it truly free Russia of its geographical curse? That's debatable. A couple of years ago, some of Russia's ultra-nationalist military bloggers talked about getting Alaska back. The chatter came in response to a new law that Putin put into place. It doled out funds for the search, registration, and legal protection of Russian property abroad, including territories from the former Empire and Soviet Union. Putin didn't reclaim Alaska, but critics questioned what protection was supposed to mean. That word was a common rhetorical tactic used in Russia's historical expansion. With the Arctic ice melting, there would be reason to want it back. The distance between Russian and American territory across the Bering Strait is only 55 miles, 88 kilometers at the narrowest points along the mainland. That would be a real problem for Russia's shipping in the open Arctic. There are 9 active U.S. military bases in Alaska. Some of them host serious hardware, like F-22 Raptors and F-35 Lightning IIs. There's a facility for testing submarines, too. Let's just say that if push came to shove, Russia's trade along the lucrative Northern Sea Route still wouldn't be secure from foreign powers. In the 21st century, the Bering Strait could be yet another treacherous choke point that Russia desperately needs to find a solution for, but can't. So you see, when it comes to Russia, the celebrated Stalin biographer Stephen Kotkin put it best. Russia wants to stand out as a great power, but its capabilities have never matched its aspirations. Because no matter how vast their armies are, even the mightiest rulers can't conquer the map. Thanks for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you want to see more videos like this, then please consider subscribing and turn on notifications. Really does make a difference. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time on MapPack.